What's up, man?
What up, dude?
How you been?
Not too bad, man.
Good.
Been hanging in there, we've been doing a little bit of gardening and stuff and
Yeah.
kind of hanging out, dude. How about you?
No, just getting crushed at work,
Yeah.
better than the alternative, I suppose.
Yeah, so remind me what you do again, man.
I work for an accounting firm. I don't do anything specifically accounting related. I don't know how familiar you are with, I'm sure you've heard the term employee-owned business.
Yep.
So what that is an employee stock ownership program. So at a high level, an owner will sell all of his shares to the company. The company will take out a loan and fund. It's kind of like a retirement plan. There's no kind of about it. It is a retirement plan.
Yeah.
But we work exclusively with these ESOP companies.
Okay. That's cool, man. How long you been doing that?
About a year now. I was working for Worthington Industries for quite a while. Look at you in the car.
What's up, man? No,
No,
I'm not in the car.
no.
So you got an echo.
I do?
Yeah, I think so. Or is that me?
Hold on. I got a new microphone, so. Does that sound better?
Let's try this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Am I still echoing?
Nope.
Echo.
I'm gonna mute mine.
Oh, crap.
Okay.
Oh, okay, here we go. Gallery view. All right.
All right. So do I go speaker view?
If you want, it won't change the recording.
Okay.
If you're on gallery view, you can see a green square around somebody.
Yeah.
And for the recording, that's the person who's on the video.
Okay.
So
Cool,
yeah,
man.
I've been playing with this a little bit for the past few weeks, so it's kind of fun.
Nice. So, basically, I'm thinking that you should be the one that kind of gives us the intro on, kind of what we talked about in terms of topic. I'll say that when you proposed it, it was, very intriguing, and I was like, oh man, we're probably gonna have to set some definitions, before we really dive into this to make sure that we're, talking about the same terms and stuff like that, and just to make sure it's clear for everyone listening. So, yeah, would you mind?
You wanted to get right into it,
or no? It doesn't matter.
All right,
It's up to you.
It's up to you guys. I don't know if you want to do a couple minutes of shooting the shit over some generic topics or whatnot.
I'm good with whatever, man. Anything you guys are good with.
What I don't know. What'd you guys think of the first couple videos that we've been doing? I've had sizable amount of feedback.
I think they've been good. I've gotten a lot of people saying that they enjoyed the fact that we were willing to hear each other out and really kind of dive in, because it seemed like the dialogue was just that, dialogue, and didn't there were no attacks and stuff like that, and so I've gotten nothing but good feedback about it.
That's like the criticism that I've received.
Really?
There wasn't enough battling. It was
hilarious.
They felt like we painted it as like left versus right, clash it out, and then we're like, all right, cool, we're agree and whatnot. So
yeah, they were waiting for the crescendo, and it never happened.
All right. So I think no matter what, we call this one like far right versus far left, an ugly argument.
Yeah.
Just get people excited.
Red graphics, red words and stuff. Bum.
Destroys each other.
Gets owned.
No. I don't know. You guys
How's
ready?
that been going, man? Like, how's the page been going? Like, we've never really talked about like how you got that started, and kind of the place that it came from and everything like that.
Yeah, I needed a vehicle to not like piss off too many friends and express things that were kind of a little bit more out there, and felt like I was kind of this new world of information, and felt like I had something that I wanted to contribute. So I started that little page, and just started posting stuff, making writings, cool videos that I liked, memes. Memes are like what kind of drives the page. Like those have become like the most shareable thing. So that's kind of used as like just a means to bring people in, and then like try to find some more like quality content to like maybe keep them there and like get an engaging base. But yeah, I kind of got motivated with our first couple Zooms because I'd never done one. I wasn't sure how it would go, and so I felt like they went well, and so I proposed doing like Zoom meetings to be like kind of a national chapter meeting for other people in the group, and so we've been doing it. We've done 4 thus far, and it's been great. I've found some really amazing people. Somebody that's in Hollywood. There's a few people in academia. There was a girl that her parents fled Cuba, and her dad was forced to be in like the Soviet army. She lost a family member to the firing line. She lost a family member to like a concentration camp there, and somehow like escaped legally, and started life fresh, and are kind of living out the American dream. So it's been really cool just hearing people's story. It feels like everybody in the group is extremely smart and feels like they've read the same book. Like it kind of like you're talking about chapter 12 stuff of some random book that you've read, and I don't know. It's been interesting. So hoping to see if we can keep it going. Possibly even branch out into in-person chapters and just see. So
Yeah, man. I think it's really cool, and it's kind of funny because the way this kind of all got started is I think I got quote unquote triggered by something that you guys had posted, and we kind of went back and forth, and they were like, "Man, let's just talk," because this is not really the forum for really getting down to the truth, and it does become mimetic, and so I have been following the page and checking out the dialogue, and I echo that. It seems like there are a lot of intelligent people within the community, and I find myself going to their pages and seeing some of the things they post, and I'll see one thing and I'm like, oh fuck that, and then I see something else and I'm like, dude, that is like spot on, like that is what I believe. And it's interesting because I think we're so divided along these lines sometimes that we're unwilling to peek into the other side and see if there's some good over there too. And clearly like there is, or else so many people wouldn't believe such a thing. Like there has to be some reason they're believing it and following it. So it's been cool.
I think jumping in too, it's like some of them are just memes, some of them are inside jokes, some of them are kind of inflammatory, and it's geared towards people that like there's some context there. And
yeah.
I see that some stuff, if without presenting the whole story or presenting the whole thing, can be inflammatory, but it kind of is what drives the page, if you will. And then it opens up conversations where now you can go like, okay, let's just throw this out there, see what happens, and then defend it. And it might be a nonsense position, or you realize that, okay, yeah, I can defend this. And, you kind of see what you draw out and what the opinions are against you. So it's kind of a no-lose situation. And, you get a chance to kind of sharpen your tools and figure out what other people think and how they feel about things. So
yeah, I agree, for sure. Man. I've been kind of doing that.
What was the one that got you?
I don't even remember, man. I think it was like something about like black crime statistics or like something like that, and just like that day, and I think it was just like the context of everything. I was just like, it just like kind of pissed me off. So I was, it kind of, I forget what I even commented on it, because at this point to me it doesn't even matter,
Yeah.
because we've opened up dialogue and we've been able to talk through things, and I see,
So
I've seen part of
are
who
you
you
talking
are.
about before we even started doing the Zooms?
Yeah, this was like way
I got you.
before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I
Yep.
thought you were talking about, you sent me a text a couple days ago asking about the left like destroying everything that it touches, or being like a force of destruction.
Oh
And
yeah, I was just curious about
for
that.
me to elaborate. So I thought I thought that was what you were talking about.
Oh no, no, no. This one, see, I wasn't like, I had no reaction to that like negatively at all. I was just like, I'm just curious about like why
Yeah, what
you
does that
believe
mean?
that
What
to
does it
be.
actually
Yeah,
specifically? Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, for sure,
Okay.
man. So yeah, so I think that's cool, man. I've been doing a little bit of type of that same interaction, if you will, on Instagram. I've been, on my story, I'll post kind of different memes and things that are going on, and man, it sometimes people really get into it with you in the messages back and forth. But it's interesting because, like, people assume certain things about me based on what I post, and then I start talking to him, and they realize, oh man, he's completely different than I thought. And I assumed who he was based off of this tiny slice of life. You create these straw men of who you think people are. And it's frustrating, but like you said, it does draw in and start something. And it is kind of the culture now, whether that's good or bad.
Yeah. I think it's mostly bad,
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly. But just finding the 5% of social media that is productive in any way is always a good thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
trying to see it for what it is and how best to use it. And I think the best use is to just meet people and then immediately get off social media.
Yeah.
Use it to, like, let's talk, let's have long form conversations, let's unpack big ideas, and just not be afraid to speak truth, or not be afraid to be wrong or say something that's not popular, and just hash things out and see where it goes, because I think a lot of the format is designed to be inflammatory and just get people worked up and into their little echo chambers, and not even hearing a full thought of what somebody else has to say.
Right. Like, it's literally designed on reactions. Like, that's what you click, you react to a post. So it's
Right.
not, you're not responding, which is, you sat down, you thought about it for a couple of days, or, you really vetted the idea out by exploring it, and then you get back to the person. It's initial response based on, you seeing that, which is emotional. So it doesn't help anything. You're thinking with your limbic brain, which, doesn't solve anything.
Yeah. I certainly is not a good time to be a famous person. I can't imagine having to deal with that. If you, God forbid, you like just move a little bit too like wrong in the wrong direction, you're screwed. And they always get so afraid of like a Twitter mob. Like, who
Yeah.
cares about a Twitter mob? Like, it's keyboard, it's neckbeards and people on their keyboards and phones. Like, they're not gonna mobilize and do anything. Like, I'm gonna fuck off, or just say nothing. Just like, so what? Just close your phone. It's always
Man.
such a neat. Once the mob is after you, there's no apology makes a mob go, oh, okay, cool, he apologized. No mob has ever done that. The only time, if you do that, they smell blood and they're go, oh, and they're gonna get 10 times worse. So you gotta just take 2 grenades, throw them up in the air, fucking level the playing field, and see what happens. That's the only chance you have. You can never appease a mob.
Man, yeah, it's tough, man, because it doesn't give people the chance at redemption, and like you said, it doesn't give you the chance to say those unpopular things, or maybe you do have some views that are off the wall, but like, do you get a chance to vet them? Like, really, like so, it's tough to really change a person's mind, or try to get them to see your perspective, or even just understand where you're coming from without having to change their mind. If you don't talk it through, like, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess before we get into anything, what do you guys think of COVID? Just what's going on, the mask mandate that we got to all follow starting tomorrow, or else you're gonna be in big trouble. What do you guys think?
I'll let you go first, Corey.
I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there. How do I feel about it? I'm not fond of the idea of the government forcing it. I think that there will be a lot of people who try to work around it. I saw something today or yesterday about employers already kind of setting up boxes for people saying things to the effect of, if you're not wearing a mask, we as your employer already assume that you have an underlying health condition that allows you, not to wear it. And we as your employer are not going to ask because of HIPAA. You're going to have a lot of people who just simply don't do it. I think that, there's that piece of it. I think that it sets kind of a shitty precedent for the government to do it. I think that I've heard a lot of constitutional scholars say that the government has the legal authority to force people to take vaccines. It's not a popular opinion, but I mean, there are several constitutional scholars who agree with that, and I would probably put this in that, like, on that same side of things. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, man. I'm not a fan of any of that stuff, like, at all. And I guess, like, where I'm at is, I know it to be real, but I don't know the extent of how bad it really is. And that for me is so frustrating that I feel like I can't trust. I don't know who to trust in these times for information like that. I see much opportunity for there to be a power grab and take advantage of this, and I don't necessarily see who's pulling the strings and what everyone's motivation is. So that makes me nervous. I don't like being told what to do, and I don't like that. But I wish everyone would have just kind of, when this first started happening, just wore a mask for a couple weeks and just said, "Fuck it, we're just gonna do this for a month. Let's just stay home for a month." Most businesses have enough cash for 1 month. I think. I mean, a lot don't have enough for 2 weeks, but I think a efficient business, a prudent business, would have enough cash for a month. And I wish we would have just did that as people and just decided, hey, let's just protect ourselves just in case. But I think people have different definitions of what they think freedom and liberty mean, and that perhaps interfered with their ability to want to do for others, and just kind of make this whole thing go away for everyone. So I don't know, man. I don't really have like super strong feelings about it. It's all so unsure.
Yeah, it just seems
Totally thought through this thought. I'm just kind of spitballing here, so it might not turn out all that well. But I think a good example of how misleading the government can be on things is marijuana, and then kind of beyond that, the war on drugs, and all of the, for lack of better words, propaganda that they put out for years and years and years and years, where they made commercials and things of that nature where people would be like crazed, after they smoked weed and start beating their wives, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I don't know. I just think that, now here we are, 30 years later or whatever it is. And, there aren't too many people other than a very small group, like on the far right, who don't want it legalized, and then even beyond marijuana, there's a lot of people who are for legalizing a lot of things as it relates to drugs. So I don't know. I think that the government has a pretty stellar track record of screwing things up when they get involved. And I don't think that when we look back on this in 20 years, that will not be the case. It already is the case, to be honest. I mean, they initially came out and said, hey, it's not only is it not needed, but we suggest against wearing masks if you're a healthy person. And now, kind of to your point, Ryan, like, who do you trust? Because there's been, nothing but conflicting information for it's probably been more than 8 weeks now, probably in the 12-week mark. So.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I didn't like in that was, and this may be inaccurate, but what I've heard is a lot of the reason that we were told not to wear masks initially is to stop panic buying and preserve the supply for healthcare providers. And so they came out and said, you didn't have to, and it doesn't protect. And then they came out and issued this statement. And to me, that concealed motive, which I don't like. Like,
Sure.
I would have preferred them come out and say, hey, let's let medical providers get them first, and then, we'll release supply, or, please don't panic buy. I don't know, man. I don't like the concealment of motive. And
so then what do you think about this? This is not, it's not totally in line, but I still think it sets a pretty shitty precedent. Bill Barr allowed and perpetuated raids on people who were hoarding masks and other, like, what were essentially caches of medical supplies.
Yeah.
And then did not compensate them, just, took the stuff. And I think that there were a few people who were arrested, whether that was, whether it was something kind of independent of that or what. I think there were a few people who were arrested after being raided for kind of hoarding and then trying to upsell all of these N95s and things of that nature. I personally am like totally against that. I think that, take the example of if a business owner, I don't know, use Florida as an example, during a hurricane, if a business owner wants to stay open and as a result charge $5 for a case of water instead of $2, I think they should be able to do so, and that they're well within their rights to do so. And I don't know, I just am not a huge fan of the government, no matter what side it is, getting involved in that way. So
I agree, man. I think that's garbage that they would, do that. Now, do I think the person who hoarded those supplies in a crisis and tried to, extremely profit off it is an asshole? I do, but I don't think anyone should be able to stop them from doing that, So yeah, I don't like that at all. It sucks.
The thing that bothers me the most about it, I still wouldn't be a huge fan of it, but if the government went about it in a way and said, hey, you've got 100,000 masks and we're going to give you, the retail price for 100,000 masks, like, that's one thing.
Right.
But to just straight up raid and, take the stuff, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that the guy's a hero, who
You're right.
has all of these masks and is trying to upsell them, but for the government to step in that way, I think is a pretty shitty thing to do and sets a not great standard. So
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't know. These are the two biggest stories: is like the protests, and then obviously COVID. And it seemed in the beginning to like this kind of unprecedented action was based on models that were comparing it almost to like the Spanish flu. And so the numbers that they were coming out with, I think a lot of it was there was an English scientist whose model was kind of the basis for some of their lockdowns and the lockdowns in the United States. And
the London guy.
Yeah, the one that broke his own like lockdown order was like out with some chick.
And I think he was cheating on his wife, or the woman that he was going out to see was cheating on her husband. I can't remember.
Yeah, something nefarious, but not something you'd want to see from the guy whose model is saying that this is basically the Spanish flu and everybody should not be outside and should be locked down. But I mean, the RO model, like how contagious it was, the mortality rate were extremely high. And so that's what we all saw and went, oh my God, we got to shut things down, bend the curve, do what we can. We're going to get, the ICUs are going to get, rushed. We're going to run out of ventilators. And that was like the initial panic. And then as more data came in, those models just plummeted. And it wasn't nearly to the level that they had thought it would be. But there was still the same, urgency and the same justification for kind of any sort of extreme policy. And so what I've seen is that as this has come out, it's somewhat deadly if you're old and have like one or more comorbidities. Anybody else is pretty fine. They're having really good success rate as far as survival rate. And it seems very politicized. It seems like two sides, like you see one side that just kind of wants it to go away, and you see another side that wants this to stick around because it's a really good political football. It's really good because if you can use this to shut down the economy and make it like an idea of saying, wow, look how mismanaged this was. There is an incentive for some people who want political power for this to be a hammer that just takes out kind of the American economy and, dismantles kind of society and allows you to rebuild things when the dust settles. And so before George Floyd, it was coming out that 5 states, New York, Illinois, California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan, maybe 6, were forcing nursing homes to accept to take in returning COVID patients. So basically, you had an old person that would get sent to the hospital, and then when they were no longer in need of like ICU care, then those states would force the nursing home to take them back. Now, they were still contagious. Well, those states saw massive amounts of deaths, particularly in the nursing homes. And the majority of the deaths that we see in the United States are coming from nursing homes. 42% are coming from specifically New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And that's a massive scandal that, it seems odd that they're mostly Democrat states.
Yeah.
Honestly, would like for this to be as big and as bad as possible. And you have to know, if you force COVID patients into nursing homes, you're going to kill people. It's just going to happen. And so it results in tens of thousands of deaths, that policy. And it got completely washed away in the news. And that should be what the news story is. So there's a lot of suspicion because things that should be news like that are not really covered. And then you hear health experts tell you, oh, we don't need masks. We do need masks. No more. You can't go to funerals. You can't see the birth of your child. You can't go to cookouts. You can't do this. You can't do this. However, if you want to join a massive protest, we completely are fine with it. And that's not a way that things are spreading. So obviously people hear that and go, fuck you. What are you talking about? That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Like, so I get the suspicion. It seems like it's being used as a club for dismantling society, because to be honest, when I look at the numbers, when I look at the survival rate, what's the end game of the masks? Because Sweden took a different approach. Sweden didn't lock down. They didn't do much of anything. While everybody else was locked down and scared in their homes, Sweden just, were still cautious, but went about their business. And now they're close to reaching herd immunity. We're not anywhere near herd immunity. I think 1% of people have had the disease. So then what's the end game? Do we just wear masks until they tell us not to wear masks anymore? Do we wear masks until they mandate us all taking vaccines over something that for me has a 99.996% survival rate? None of those things justify such extreme action. We've seen pandemics in the past. In 1968, a couple 100,000 people died of the Hong Kong flu. And they had whatever that hippie festival that everybody went to.
Woodstock.
Somebody help me out.
Woodstock.
Yeah. That's when they had Woodstock. They didn't shut anything down. People were flocking and fucking in the fields, and that was it.
In the mud and stuff, rolling around.
Yeah. Spreading that Hong Kong flu. So it just looks like a device to kind of bring about a new era. I think there's going to be a pre-COVID world and a post-COVID world, kind of like there was a pre-9/11 and a post-9/11. It's going to be justification for extreme action, government overreach, and I think this is a turning point where we don't know a world that's similar to what we've seen post 2021. So I see it being a reason to collapse the economy and just a usurpation of power, and it's going to be completely corrupted.
You mentioned,
I think.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Let me just add. Too many people just buy into consensus, and the scientist told me. So wearing masks, not wearing masks, whether we should shut down, whether you should be afraid, whether you should stay in your home. Science doesn't make those decisions. Science informs those decisions. It is each one of us has our assessment of risk. The same science that says wear a mask is the same science that said no more travel. Nobody should drive cars, or everybody should wear a helmet. We all have an assessment of risk to go, well, I'm willing to deal with this, and this. I get it. If the nursing homes are a problem, shut them down. Make sure that you have really strict policies on who gets to go in and out. But for the majority of the population, we should want this thing to burn out as quickly as possible, reach herd immunity, and then the vulnerable can be released back into society. Yeah. So I think it's completely inconsistent, corrupted. And the other thing, there's so many examples of scientific consensus being horribly wrong. For example, there was scientific consensus that it was fine to put lead in gasoline. They were putting lead in gasoline. Lead was just becoming everywhere, making people dumber and just wreaking havoc on society. And they had teams of scientists be like, "This is perfectly fine. This is perfectly fine," And just because there's a consensus doesn't mean the process isn't politicized, nor does it mean that it's not corrupted.
Right. I think there are a couple of things at play to that point, because one thing is, like, scientific consensus can change over time. Because, like, at one point we thought, the world was flat and there was an edge of the earth, and, that was the consensus until we discovered otherwise. But, at the same time, you see back in, it was like the 50s when they were telling us that cigarettes weren't too bad for us, and, it was okay to smoke, and that was, quote unquote, the scientific consensus. And that was, just pure lie. Like, they knew that was not the case. So I think, you have those two different scenarios at play. I thought it was interesting you mentioned pre 9/11 world and post 9/11 world being similar to COVID as well.
Yeah.
I had to go to the airport for my buddy's wedding, and you know, I'm in a wheelchair now, and I had to go to secondary search, and they basically molested me, and then they're like, hey, we need to, you know, take you back to a private room because he grabbed my genitalia and decided that he thought it was drugs. And so we had to go to a different room where I had to expose
The
myself
contraband.
to this man to show him that I wasn't carrying keys back from Mexico at my buddy's wedding. So it's like, damn, if that's the world that we get after, you know, a building blows up, imagine like what it's gonna be now, like with the new
Oh yeah.
technology. And so that shit scares the hell out of me, dude. If
Oh
I'm
yeah.
being honest, it really does.
For sure. Yeah, it's over something that's not seemingly to be that bad, and there's no, as we gain more knowledge and the survival rate goes up and up, and you know we're starting to realize that maybe way more people had it than we realized. Then that means it's not as bad if the deaths aren't going up anywhere near. If we're realizing that more and more people had it, that means the survival rate is even better than we anticipate. And you hear a lot of inconsistencies about. So another thing that I have an issue with is providing financial incentives to hospitals to pronounce COVID deaths. So Medicare will pay out more if it's a COVID death compared to just a heart attack. So when you present financial incentives to, you know, corrupt data, it's going to become corrupted. It's just that's human nature.
But like, who
Hospitals
makes
want more
that
money.
decision though? Like, who from Medicare like says that you get paid out more? Like, how does that become a thing? I don't understand that process.
Honestly, I don't know. Just internal bureaucrats that are lifelong kind of government employees. I honestly don't know. All I know is that they have provided a financial incentive to, you know, to call deaths COVID deaths as opposed to something else.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of things that don't seem right, and I completely get the suspicion. I personally don't wear a mask. Um, it's just I'm of the opinion that you just have to let it burn out. I'm not sitting here going to wear a mask for 2 years and then hope that a vaccine gets rushed out with lower standards for it's you know, like that's
Yeah.
not what the plan is, but it seems to be like that's what the plan is, and you're going to go along with it, or you're going to be, you know, ostracized.
Yeah.
You're
Straight
already
up.
starting to see neighbors, you know, telling on other neighbors, and you know, it looks like a communist country where it's like, hey, report people not wearing masks, you know, tell on these people, and it's just turning, you know, people against each other.
Dude, so I
I can't
see.
remember.
I'll go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ron.
I was gonna say I see a lot of that, man, and you know, that scares the hell out of me because you do see parallels to you know, the Russian Revolution and all that stuff. At the same time, like seeing Trump sending, you know, federal agents to these Democrat cities, like uh, you know, no matter how you feel about the protesters or rioters or whatever you want to call them, that sets a precedent to me. That's like, how is that okay? Like that seems like super totalitarian, and it's just like we're heading in two directions that I don't like either of. Is kind
For
of
sure.
where I'm at, you know?
Yeah.
I think I do think that is a huge problem. The feds going in, and I think today they announced that they're going to be going into like Chicago and somewhere else. I can't remember off the top of my head.
It was,
But
I think it was most of the cities TJ named earlier, like the Democrat-led
yeah,
cities.
I think it was like, you know, Maryland,
Chicago.
Chicago. It doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is that it's happening, and it's like verifiably happening. And it's definitely cause for concern. I've heard a lot of people, particularly on the right, who are like, oh, you know, serves them right. You know, they shouldn't have been doing this in the first place. And not to get super wild, but if the Fed started rounding people up because people weren't wearing masks, people on the right would be shitting themselves. So it's just not. I'm not trying to make a slippery slope argument here, but it's not good for sure.
I mean, politically too, it's not that smart of a choice. I mean, it's a lose-lose situation because as much as I don't like federal police coming in, I also don't like selective policing within these cities, meaning a certain group has, kind of radical Marxists within it, and that same mentality has kind of infiltrated city council, mayors, to the point that they don't do anything about a group of people commandeering 6 blocks of Seattle, or the same thing in Portland. If a radical right wing group, the Tea Party, but had neo-Marxist influence, had just commandeered several blocks of Denver, we'd be shitting our pants. The media would be all up in arms, and the police would come in, and it would be done immediately. But we have a situation where the police aren't doing anything, the states aren't doing anything, and they're just allowing these places to destroy businesses that people have worked for, and hurt people out in the streets. I mean, it's people who live in these cities. They don't want this. They want the police to say, you know what, you can't commandeer 6 blocks of a city that people live in and reside in and eat here, because you want somewhat of a revolution. You want to spur the revolution. So, but politically, one, it's a bad look. I don't think you should do it. And 2, let them do this, because if you're as a politician, you want to be able to present the alternative. Like, see these 19 cities that are on fire right now. Do you want that, or do you want some more common sense law and order? And so, because you're starting to see where the effects of defund the police completely starts to look scary, where people within these communities go, you know what, maybe that's not a good idea. You're starting to see New York and Chicago and all these other places where the crime rate has just shot up, murder rate has shot up, and obviously it's enabling people to say, okay, there's no consequences if you do anything. So it's an ugly, destructive, chaotic situation.
It's interesting that you bring up the crime rate, specifically in those cities, and really everywhere, for that matter. I was having a conversation with a couple of pretty close friends, and I had told them, I said, hey, now that all of this is happening, I said, I guarantee you it will not be long before people on the left start talking about gun control and how, all the rise in crime is due to the influx of guns. Because I don't know if you guys monitor any of that, but gun sales and I think it's NCIB is the arm of the FBI who does background checks for firearms. They have been like breaking records for like the last 90 to 100 days for federal background checks for firearms. And I mean, if you wanted to be in an industry, that's the industry to be in right now. But
yeah,
I bring that up because even quote unquote left wing outlets are now bringing up the influx in crime, violent crime. And I was just reading an article on NPR the other day that was saying, quote unquote, we must act now. This uptick in violence is causal, or that the increased rate of people owning firearms is causal to these violent crimes and murders and burglaries and all kinds of other stuff. And if you look at them closely, they are directly related to, or seem to be anyways, the defund the police talk/movement that has been going on.
I will say correlation does not equal causation, and that's used in a lot of people's arguments. Um, it's interesting. So I think a couple things like we talked about maybe need to be defined, like for me at least. We talked about Marxism a little bit, we talked about defund the police. I think defund the police does not sit well on people's ears because it sounds like it's like just take away like all their money. There are some things to the movement I do find merit to, though. To be honest with you, um, I don't think if there's like a burglary that happens while people are out of town and they come back and person's gone. I don't think like a guy with a gun necessarily needs to show up and uh, be the person who takes the report. I feel like you could save a lot of resources by being just some person like an insurance adjuster type that goes out there and takes the report. So I think we could reallocate resources better. I don't like small towns police departments having like MRAPs and stuff like that. Like I think those are a little overkill. Like maybe that's for the SWAT team. So I just think uh, we could use funds more efficiently. And I do think it's bigger than. I think the military-industrial complex has a lot to do with the reason why we see the weaponization of police departments, which is maybe a talk for another time. But so there are some things I see that are that have merit, but on the other end of the spectrum, like I, I think people need to realize police officers are the people that show up when there are people shooting each other, and you're trying to pay them like $40,000. Like, what do you expect someone to want to do that for? I think you have to give these people appropriate funding and appropriate training and make sure that they have the tools they need to do the job. But I think we need to find a balance of what that means. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I would agree.
so. I guess I would say a couple of things. I am largely against quote unquote defund the police. And if we're going to define things, I think most people define defund the police now very much the same way that you just defined it. Like, hey, let's, not get rid of, but just reallocate, X number of dollars maybe to somebody else, another department or whatever, and we can maybe go about doing things a little differently, which I'm not totally against. However, despite what anybody says, that is not what it started out as. Defund the police, started out as, defund the police. And then they started getting all of this pushback, and then it slowly became, oh, well, we don't actually mean get rid of police. We mean, we're going to reallocate resources. And, that moving of the goalposts all the time by both sides, really, but, doesn't do anybody any good. Growing up where we grew up, we used to get quite a bit of attention from the police. I mean, I saw Alex get his ass beat, in front of Sue's house, so I have like this weird feeling that it's like a competing view, basically, of police. I think a lot of them are more or less like bullies, for lack of better words. They love power, and power loves power, and that just kind of accumulates over time. And but defunding the police, I think if we're talking in 10 years and any of this actually is carried out, I think we'll be having a conversation about how this hurt the very people that they are claiming they want to protect. People in the inner cities, defunding the police, we're talking about large metropolitan areas. We're not talking about, Worthington, Ohio. We're not talking about Dublin, Ohio. We're not talking about Upper Arlington, Ohio. They're going to have the same, 15 police officers that they've had for the last 25 years who, sit in front of the fire station on High Street and, give people tickets for going 36 and a 35. Those aren't the people we're talking about. We're talking about large metropolitan areas, New York, Atlanta, all of these places. The people that you are going to impact negatively are the very people that say they're being harmed, whether it be because of mean, racist police officers or what have you. Defund the police, I speculate to say, will do far more harm to those communities than any racist police officer could have ever done.
So I think it's interesting. So you said you thought it was like kind of moving the goalpost when it started out as defund the police, and then it changed to no, this is like what we meant by it, and it's like kind of reallocation of services. Would that be like the correct summary of what you said?
More or less.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know if in this case I see it that way. I think that might be compromise. Maybe it started out as people were freaking out because they were upset, and they're like, okay, maybe we don't mean defund the police. That's a little radical. But what if we do this? And I think that's where conversation travels. And I think maybe the next element of that conversation is precisely what you're saying. It's like, but look, if we do that in these large metropolitan areas, this is going to happen, and we need to be wary of that. And I think that's how the conversation maybe gets carried forward. But I think people just freak out at words that they don't know the definitions of or agree on the definitions of.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure. One issue I have is I'm not quite sure that I understand that there's many cases of kind of bad relationships between minority communities and the police, but the idea that police shootings and police killings are racially targeted, I don't know if there's any evidence to really suggest that. Meaning, I think that those shootings are an issue, but it's been made into like specifically a police on black issue. And that's the part that kind of loses me. I don't see the evidence to suggest that black people are specifically targeting for shootings. There might be cases of, I know that you've recently given some anecdotal stories of obviously not being killed, but of run-ins that were negative. So I don't have any evidence to say that's worse for black people, but specifically shootings and killings, which they do collect large amounts of data. I don't see that specific targeting. I know that they've looked for it in several cases and find kind of the opposite. Sometimes the opposite is true, where it's like, well, actually white officers are less likely to kill a black culprit, or, and possibly because of the stigma or the pressure that would exist if it were to occur. But what's the evidence that suggests that black people are specifically targeting, or that police are specifically targeting black people for killing and for shootings?
So I think regardless of whether or not you think that there is a problem or not racially when it comes to police shootings, there's
obviously there's a problem with shootings, but that it's specifically the targeting of black people, which is how this is presented.
Right. I think there's always going to be a high level of scrutiny due to the history of Black people in the police, and police in America largely starting out as slave patrol and how it evolved, over time. So I think there's, I don't want to say hypersensitivity, because I think people are hypersensitive to me saying hypersensitivity, but I can't think of a good word to equate to that, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to convey. But the thing that frustrates me, I think, when it comes to this, is it devolves into a conversation about race instead of being a conversation about police brutality. There's a guy, Daniel Shaver, I believe was the guy's name, white guy. He's in a hotel crawling away on the floor, and the police shot this man. He proposed no threat to them. And I'm like, it doesn't matter if you're Black, if you're white, if you're green, if you're yellow. Perhaps we need to maybe look at police a little bit and see how we can create an environment where stuff like that doesn't happen, no matter what color you are. And so those are the conversations that I think should be happening. But I think it devolves into these, conversations about statistics and things like that. And
I completely agree.
Yeah.
But it seems like we're basing it on a view of reality that may not be so. Like, it's more a perception of reality painted by media in selective coverage of police shootings.
I agree that it's very selective coverage.
Wow, why do police keep killing Black people at an unprecedented rate? And that's the issue that this is why this whole thing exists. This is the Black Lives Matter movement. This is police killing, specifically targeting Black people. But that basis, that initial foundation of this movement, I grant you the initial beginnings of the police. I grant you any kind of anecdotal evidence of police. And obviously, I think police are going to have more issues in areas of crime. And I think a more productive conversation are why is there more crime in Black neighborhoods, for example? Because that's rooted in some of the institutions that I brought up in like the previous talk. Those are foundational, incentivizing mothers to separate from fathers, and public policy overruling education. There's some foundational issues that lead to crime, gang membership, whatever. Those are the primary issues, and then surface level is more encounters with police. But I just see it as we're just looking at this one thing, the symptom of police specifically targeting Black people, and we're not looking at any sort of objective data to paint our realities. We're purely looking at what we're fed from mainstream media sources to say, look at this again. It happened again. It happened again. It happened again. And that's what shapes our perception of reality, as opposed to any sort of objective data that says, look, they are specifically targeting Black people. They're killing them at an unprecedented rate compared to other races. We need to focus on this issue. So it just seems like it's the concept, the primary reason why this exists is faulty. And I would grant them if the issue was something else that was valid, but it seems to be, and we can get into kind of criticism that's, that productive criticism versus destructive criticism. This seems to be destructive criticism. Not looking for any kind of objective data, not looking for any kind of production of saying, listen, this is an issue, but we need to get it down to here. And then maybe an acknowledgement of like, okay, body cameras and this have worked out. Now we need to think about this policy and this policy. It's just raw emotion and movements. And I feel like that's what's wanted, not solving any problems.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of quick things. For those who have not looked into Stanford Prison Experiment, I suggest doing so, because I think that like what happens to a person psychologically on either side, be it, the quote unquote enforcers or those who are subject to those enforcers um, is pretty enlightening if you actually look into it. Um, a couple of other things that I would suggest looking into that I think 100% should be gotten rid of is what is called the warrior mindset in policing. And so Dave Grossman was a special forces guy. He was a colonel, I believe, in the military. And I had actually been to a couple of his trainings while I was in the Marine Corps through, not directly, but indirectly, a couple of his trainings. And the fact that police are trying to employ that same mindset on, the streets, really, of any, whether it be a small, or large city, it's pretty wild to me that we would allow that to go on. But then beyond that, I think post-traumatic stress is like a very, very, very real thing, not only for police officers, but for nurses, for firefighters, for for all of these people in these jobs where they're kind of experiencing traumatic things, or at least are more to experience traumatic things more often than just Joe walking down the street. The difference between those three jobs is police officers are the only ones who can enforce anything and kind of be dicks about things, you know what I mean? But that kind of goes back to the Stanford prison experiment for me. And it goes so far beyond just a racial issue, and the data just does not back up that it is a racial issue. Kind of to your point, Ryan, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was in a hotel. I don't know how old he was, but he was younger than we are, and walked out of his hotel room and seemingly was doing what the police officer was instructing him to do. And the police officer was being about the biggest ass that you could ever hope that he would be. And then to be shot whatever 5 or 6 times is it's pretty shitty. So
it's shitty, man. Yeah, I think the Stanford prison experiment is very enlightening. That one, I mean, they had to shut it down early because of how bad it got.
that's right.
Another one I think is interesting is the Milgram experiment. As it pertains to people following authority and listening to orders. That one is pretty gnarly as well. They took people and basically just had a guy in a lab coat instruct people to give increasing, or what they thought were increasing voltages of electricity to a participant, and even went past the lethal level in some cases, just because someone told them to do it. So that one scares the hell out of me too. I did want to go back to something you said, TJ. You talked about statistics, and actually Corey, you talked about it too, like statistics not supporting the reality, and I believe that to be true upon looking at data objectively. When you break it down, I mean, there are different ways to break down data and stuff, but there've been a couple different studies that have conflicted with what I thought was the view of the world. But perception is reality, and a lot of people don't have access to even the internet in this day and age, which you think is weird. But you see the news, you see the media, and like you said, every day you see a picture. Black man killed by police, black man killed by police. That weighs on your psyche. You're like, holy shit! Every fucking day I see this. Every day they're killing another one of us. They're killing us all the time. Like, you know what I mean? So. That I think that's a data point too, man. So I don't want to, discredit that, because if that's something that someone's analyzing, within their life on a daily basis, while for them it might be, anecdotal, it is a data point that they are considering, you know?
I get that, and I think that that's very warranted. The only way that I would really push back on that is to say that that's not how, at least in the past, is not how policy prescriptions were gone about. You know, just because
I agree with that.
you know,
Yeah.
for lack of better words, feel a certain way does not mean that public policy needs to change because of your perception. And that's what I'm seeing being called for, is like these sweeping changes to public policy that, you know, I'm not suggesting that you can't feel a certain way. You know, if, you know, Ryan, you've brought up, you know, these experiences. You know, I'm not Black. I have had some not great experiences with police officers. I've also had some really awesome ones. But that is not how historically public policy has gone about being made.
I agree that public policy shouldn't be made under the guise of public sentiment at the time, you know, in the short term. I think, though, that there is some like credence that needs to be paid to public sentiment, because I think that is what drives change. I think, though, that maybe I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. But I think well, I largely agree with you. Um, I can't really like formulate my opinion right now. Actually, like,
I guess, you know, if they were interested in, like, quote unquote, giving the people what they want, you know, marijuana would have been legal 10 years ago. I mean, it's been broadly supported by both sides, you know, for quite a while at this point. And, you know, it seems like it's incrementally moving in that direction. But, you know, again, public policy in the past has not been made based on whether it be a small or large group of individuals' feelings, especially if those feelings are, I don't want to say not warranted, but not backed up by numbers.
so I guess, yeah. So I think I know where I was going to go. Kind of came back to me. So I guess then, what would you call like the civil rights movement then? Because that was, you know, largely a movement based in people saying, "Hey, the world is unfair to me," or, you know, the country's being unfair to me, and here's how it's happening. And, you know, it took a lot of protesting. It took a lot of you know, sit-ins and boycotts and things like that in order to enact this change. So it was policy based on, you know, how people were feeling, and it did, you know, make the world better in a lot of ways. Um, so I guess
There's no
I
question
think
that
that the difference between those two examples is one is based on perception, and then the example you just brought up is based on something that was objective. Is that they could actually point to laws and say that this is how we're treated unfairly or unequal laws. And so I
that's
think one's concrete and the other one is just a perception that's painted by media.
that's what I was going to say, is that there were very, like, just objectively, there were some really shitty laws on the books. And, you know, I'm not suggesting that bad things don't happen to good people. But, you know, once again, that was the government. That was the government saying that that was like okay or right, you know, that segregation, you know, for example, like in the South, even if somebody wanted to allow blacks to drink from the same water fountain as whites. They were not allowed to. It didn't matter what, that business owner thought, how he felt, etc. There were laws on the books that prevented that from being the case. So, I mean, kind of to TJ's point, that's what I think the biggest difference between the two is.
So, me and my buddy were having a conversation about this the other day, and he's saying that one of the biggest things that he thinks changed in terms of laws is back in the day, certain language was acceptable that isn't acceptable now. Like you could, outright discriminate back in the day and call someone 3/5 of a person, whereas now that's not acceptable. And so, policies written and you measure impact over time. And so
Just real quick, if you don't mind me butting in, do you know what the 3/5 compromise was? Like the actual act of being considered 3/5 of a person? What that pertains to, I mean?
I won't claim to be an expert in it. No.
So that was actually a compromise between the North and the South when they were determining congressional power. It was, in fact, the South wanted blacks to be considered a full, wanted them to be counted fully. And it was the North that said, no, you don't give them equal rights. You don't treat them equal. They're just property to you. They don't get to be counted as people to give you more congressional power. So the North wanted them to count as 0. And then they came up with the 3/5 compromise. And that kind of limited some of the congressional power in the South. Not to say that obviously that, slavery is terrible and all that, but just that's what the 3/5 compromise was.
Yeah. And I mean, still though, the point remains that,
Sure.
You have situations like that arise, and now you have to wait for the effects of policy to show themselves rather than the blatant discrimination to be, forecast, I guess, through the language that policies and things are written in. It's more discreet now versus previously when it wasn't. And so I think that's a factor to consider as well. There are policies and things that disproportionately affect people. And so that's not outright discrimination, but like, what else is it? It's like the system's design is doing what it's designed to do. That's how I feel. Like the systems are designed do what they're designed to do. The car drives because that's what it's designed to do. Laws work like they're designed to work. So I think if equity was, maybe not equity, if fairness or justice was, what we're all kind of seeking, then policies would reflect that.
What do you want? Laws that treat everybody? Do you want equality under the law?
I want
policies that you want their aim to be equality or equity?
I think like equality of opportunity, if that makes sense. Or like, I guess I don't know really like how to describe it other than I want everyone to like have a fair chance at, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without.
When people talk about equality, what I want is just equal protection under the law. The law sees everyone as an equal. My vote counts the same as your vote. The law treats me identical as it treats you.
That's exactly it.
I think that's the goal of society. I think when we break it down, you and I would probably come to an agreement that that's what we want. I get confused when people say equal opportunity. I kind of get where they're coming from, and I'm not totally against it. But at the end of the day, like, should you force upon some kind of law that makes sure that my kid has equal opportunity as Jeff Bezos's kid? Obviously not. Jeff Bezos's kid, if he even has a kid, is going to have way more opportunity, way better private schooling and money.
There's a way to correct for that. Yeah.
I'm honestly okay with it. I'm perfectly fine with it. That's I don't feel a need to correct that through force of law. The people that scare me are the people who want equity, because equity is equal outcomes, meaning no matter what you do, equal outcome. That's that's the utopian goal of communism, is that just you get the same. There's no reason to be ambitious. People aren't equal, so naturally, if you grant them liberty, you're not going to get equal outcome. So in order to get equal outcome, then you have to take away liberty. So that's a word that's been starting to buzz around. That is kind of that's a signal to me of like, it's a dangerous word. I
Yeah.
feel.
And so I don't think the quality of outcome is what I want all. I think the Pareto principle does operate in life. You're going to have in any system where people exist and they're arranged in a hierarchy, like, Jordan Peterson talks about this. There is going to be a minority of people who do the majority of work, the 80-20 rule.
And we should want the resources to accumulate to the most competent.
But I think one of my criticisms of today's society, I won't say of capitalism, I don't say what it's of. A thing that I see that's perhaps a problem is rising inequality and people who don't work for things and are just granted these things through it's like inheritance, or like, what did Jeff Bezos's wife do other than like be his wife? You know what I mean? Like, what did she actually do? And now she's the richest woman in the world, or his ex-wife. So like, that's not competence. That's not anything other than just like pure luck, I guess, or I don't know. So I think people see that and they're like, how the fuck? And if you're a person that's working for, the wages that waitresses and stuff work for, you're just like, how the fuck is that even like allowed to be a thing? So I think you do kind of have to control for some of that tension. Now, do I think that people should have equality of outcome? We should all have the same things? Not at all. That's a terrible idea. And we see that hasn't worked where it's been tried and implemented. Even though the argument can be made that it's never been purely implemented, but it hasn't worked historically. So I think we should look at that and maybe say, hold on, maybe we have a good thing here with what we're doing. Let's just fix this. I don't know. What do you think about that?
It's something to the effect of 5% or so of all millionaires get their money through inheritance. And then even beyond that, I can't remember if it's 2 generations or 3 generations.
Third generation businesses, yeah.
Yeah, third generations completely shit the bed, and that includes wealth as well. It's something to the effect of 5% of all millionaires were inherited, any of that money was inherited.
The majority is people from their 401k, I believe. Is that correct? Or
right.
Yeah. I think that was in like The Millionaire Next Door, or I forget what book that was.
Like 65 or 70% are from 401ks.
Yeah.
Just, Joe Blow walking down the road. That's who we're talking about. And, so to try to control for something that takes up so little space, is, I don't think is a fight worth having. Not only is it not a fight worth having, I would argue that it's immoral to, kind of going back to that, the government taking the masks from that guy, no matter how they were acquired or why they were acquired. The government coming in and taking those because the government thought that, he was wrong in doing so is not something that sits right with me, and I don't think it's a road that we want to go down.
Right. And please don't misunderstand and think that I'm advocating for us to take any millionaire's money or anything that they built. That's not what I'm after at all.
For sure, I don't do that at all. I would just, I do think that there are people who are for that. I do think that there are people who
Eat the billionaires.
yeah, I mean, you know, there are people who, like are for a wealth tax, for example. Now, in its current form, like anybody who talks about a wealth tax, I don't even think starts until you hit like the 50 million mark, which, I hope like hell I get there, but the likelihood of it happening is, very slim. But a wealth tax should actually scare people. Should actually scare people. That's when it's everything you own. Your house, that value, the one car, 10 cars, whatever, the value of those vehicles. It's not just cash that you have sitting around somewhere and you're taxed on that amount of money. It's everything that you own. And then beyond that, you're paying crazy amounts of money to account for that. Nobody's going to pay those taxes anyways. It's like when the tax rate was, whatever, 90%. He says, oh, the tax rate was 90%. Well, nobody paid 90% because everybody was trying to, quote unquote, cheat their way out of it.
Hide money in the Cook Islands and Bermuda. Hell, the Panama Papers, we saw everybody's doing it, hiding their money everywhere with the current tax structure. So,
right. You want to increase the incentive for them to do that or decrease the incentive for them to do that?
Right.
I think that capitalism, unfettered, the freer the economy, the more mobility you see between classes. There's always this talk of like the rising 1%. There's not like an understanding that the 1% is constantly changing and people are moving. But the people are able to use the force of law to kind of preserve and keep competition down. The more we open the economy up for everybody and, allow for competition, the more you will see businesses fluctuate, people become poor, go to rich and back and forth. And that's the American history, is people coming in with nothing on their backs. And then within 1, 2, 3 generations, they're living in a nice house and going to college and all this. There's another, for some reason, I think people think that wealth is money. Wealth is not money. Wealth is a state of mind. Wealth is talent. Wealth is developed. There's an illusion that if you just give people money that they're going to be wealthy. No, they'll just lose it immediately. It's the same reason that people in sports or lottery ticket winners immediately become broke 80% of the time because they're not wealthy. If you're 21, you got money way too soon, as opposed to some guy who's 55, worked his ass off to get there. And so it's a trap for some to think that money equals wealth. I think just giving as much opportunity as possible and stepping back and creating an equal playing field, you will see kind of better results. And I think anytime that the government tries to come in and adjust for that, it always has negative effects. There's always just unforeseen stuff. You encourage people to leave the country. You encourage people to hide their money or not pay taxes at all. There's a sense that it's a zero-sum game, that in order for other people to get money, that you got to take it from these people over here, when all you got to do is grant them the ability to just create and build wealth. Money adjusts. It inflates naturally. It's not about dollars, it's actual wealth. And so just because Jeff Bezos, he could have billions and billions and billions of dollars, and I don't need a single one of his dollars to become rich. Don't need a single one. I just need other people to get to go, all right, I want to have transactions, with this person. And I know we don't like people who inherit, but, like, as Corey said, by the third generation, that money's pretty much well gone. And like 70% of third generation businesses fail. They cease to exist because that person might have had the money, might have been given the money, wasn't wealthy, didn't know what it took to get there. They were just given it, and then they didn't have the same mechanisms as the father and grandfather. I think people too just think that rich people put money in the mattress. It's like we benefit from rich people who are competent wanting to become richer. Like Bill Gates. Bill Gates didn't just siphon money to Bill Gates. He created he built a new industry, new economy. He made 1,200 people millionaires. 1,200 people became millionaires because of Bill Gates's pursuit to become rich. He made businesses across the country much richer, much more efficient. And it's just people pursuing their own self-interest in the United States has dropped the poverty rate throughout the world, where it's like less than 10% now, where, you go back 50 to 100 years, it was 90+%. So I don't think wealth inequality is a problem. I think poverty is a problem. And I think dependence is a problem. And I think homelessness is a problem. But wealth inequality just sounds like envy and a misunderstanding of capital.
I do think that it sounds like envy, and probably arguably is. The thing that I disagree with you on, I think it's first important to point out that most people, when they talk about Jeff Bezos and, oh, he's got, a bejesus amount of money, the guy has access to as much money as he wants, but that doesn't mean he has $1 billion sitting in his bank account.
Right.
It's in stock.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's, these guys
conflate net
business,
worth with liquid cash.
And that's where a wealth tax comes in, and it should seriously scare the shit out of people, because, now, you'd have Jeff Bezos paying, however much money for money that is not sitting in his account. He doesn't, even though he owns the stock, he doesn't have the funds to pay whatever tax was levied against him because of that. But I guess the thing that I disagree with TJ on is I do see wealth inequality as a problem. I think best case scenario, it would align, just as you put it, in that, we should focus on bringing people out of poverty. But, and while I do think it is kind of immoral to take people's money and redistribute it to the bottom, it is just a matter of fact that the more inequality, the more destabilizing the force. And that's what I think the problem is. So it's not that I'm trying to combat wealth inequality necessarily. I'm trying to combat the destabilization that the inequality creates.
That's precisely what I mean when I discuss wealth inequality as well. There's a human element that exists that people often don't consider when it comes to these things. Whether you believe that the rules of capitalism are fair or not, envy is real, and people I don't think it's right. I don't believe in the redistribution of wealth. I don't think we should solve it that way at all. I truly believe that you create, what you think about, and you are a product of your thinking. But there is rooted in reality a problem that arises that we've seen historically when populations are under the pressure of too much difference between the top and the bottom. And so I want to protect against whatever instability is there. And how do we solve that? I wish I fucking knew, dude. I don't know. I don't think any of the prevailing theories make much sense, but it seems that people just keep yelling at each other about how they think we should fix it instead of working through it.
The problem that I have with that is I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that universal basic income is a good idea. The issue that I have with it is that government tends to screw up everything, and they would not go about it in a responsible way. I mean, I can say that with a good amount of certainty. I mean, if they ran it the same way they ran Social Security, it'd be, broken in 10 years. And I think that it would require getting rid of basically every other government assistance program. to be self-sustaining. And I think that that is so unpalatable to so many people. Like if you said, for example, even if you talk about now, hey, in 30 years, we're going to start moving towards a goal of in 30 years having no more Social Security. Even people our age are like, well, fuck that. Like I paid into it.
Right.
And, you know, it's so unpalatable to people that they immediately dismiss, you know, anything that you have to say. And it falls in line with once you give something to people, you can't take it back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the same could be said for power, you know, kind of circling back to a little bit what we were talking about earlier. That's why all this, you know, government mandated action that's happening right now scares the hell out of me because we're setting a weird precedent. But yeah, I know I brought that kind of full circle, but TJ, I know you talked a little bit about like Marxism and stuff. We hadn't really, you know, touched on kind of like, you know, what you see there and, you know, kind of how that ties into everything.
Let me add one thing to Corey and what you said, and then yeah, I'd like very much we can get into Marxism and all that. For a wealth tax, what's the argument for a wealth tax? It's that don't worry, it'll only be the rich that pay the wealth tax. That's the argument. That's the same exact argument that was used to bring about federal taxes in the first place. Before 1913, there was no permanent federal income tax.
Exactly.
And the argument at the time was, you got all those rich people that could help pay some services. Don't worry, this won't apply to you. 5 years later, it applies to everybody, and tax rates have gone up ever since. So we know what they mean when they say that, because we have history to show that. If wealth inequality is a problem that you want to solve, unfetter the economy. Get the government out of everything. Stop squashing people with licensing laws, for example. Stop making it illegal to sell drugs or single-use cigarettes or all kinds of stuff. There's limitations on how the poor can get themselves out of poverty. And so if you just don't make anything that's not harming anybody illegal, you know, you should have the ability to just buy some shit, buy some fruit, start a lemonade stand. Girls can't even start lemonade stands now. So there's so many ways in which the force of law is used to punish people and doesn't allow them to get started, to live the American dream. And so I think if you granted people that ability, if you unfettered the economy, if you just let freedom be what it is supposed to be, I think we just get it stuck in our head that America is capitalism, America is capitalism, America is capitalism. And we're far from capitalist since 1913. So I think you remove all the restrictions, you get rid of licensing, you get the government out of education, you get them to stop incentivizing bad behavior and removing fathers from homes. You get all this fixed. And in the meantime, if we determine, you know, I'm not a fan of UBI, but I would choose a negative income tax. That's what kind of Milton Friedman's, what he was a fan of. Not as a policy. It's just if we must, a negative income tax rate. So meaning if you make $5,000, we bump it up to whatever we determine the threshold is. And that gets rid of all the bureaucrats, that gets rid of all the Department of this, HUD, of food stamps, all this. Just here's this much money and you determine how best to spend it. And not give it to everybody. If you have a job, there's no reason to give you $500 or $1,000 and inflate the economy. I mean, a much better stimulus is just, like I said, where we work Monday and Tuesday for the state. Give me those fucking days back, and I might not even work. I might just work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I'm working less two days less. Now there's a need in the labor market for more people. So I'm not a fan of UBI, especially proactively. It's one of the things you do reactively if you do it at all. There's a massive need for jobs. I think we don't get creative enough. We think that, okay, now once the robots and machines take over, we're all gonna be sitting here with our thumbs up our asses. Nobody can get a job when we can't feed ourselves. We've thought that throughout history. Oh, nobody's farmers now because we have this equipment. Well, then the economy grew, more industries developed, and there was more opportunity. And so I think it's just the process of becoming richer and more efficient isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means that things will become cheaper. So I think the greatest stimulus that they could do is is just not spend so much and not tax so much. But anyway, to finish that, I guess if we want to get into.
Do you have something to say, Ryan?
I think that's interesting. I'm sitting over here trying to process it, and this is definitely one I'm going to have to listen back to, and really digest these ideas and stuff. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, man. I think that's interesting.
I would say this, and I kind of hit on this. I think to kind of open my UBI conversation. I agree with everything that you just said. I think it's very unrealistic, and I think that that's what I think that is where I stop, is just coming to the realization that the government is not going to relinquish so much power that they just, get rid of all ridiculous red tape and all of these other things. I think if they were going to do something that would help the most people, I think that it's UBI. I wish that it did not have to happen in order to kind of bridge that gap of wealth inequality. And I wish that wealth inequality was not a problem, meaning that nobody was envious of all of the rich people and that they didn't care enough that it didn't become a problem for them individually or collectively. But it is. I think that trying to go back to a time when people were totally, call it free, if you will. I think we're well past that, and I don't think that we will move dramatically in that direction anytime soon without some serious shit going down first. So I think UBI is the only way that we get to that place.
And now that you say that, that kind of struck my thoughts a little bit, and I think that's where I had to digest it, because it's like there's a good through line podcast on presidential power and talks about how it's just expanded and expanded and expanded and expanded over time, and never in the history of ever have we decreased the power of the presidency. So it's tough for me to see how that would be realistic. And then I think another aspect of just completely unfettered capitalism that I have trouble with is things like the FDA and making sure that things are safe. I was the 14th person in the entire world that had a medicine shot into my spinal cord. I want to make sure that shit is cool. And I know the risk associated with it and stuff. I know that it's still pretty unknown, but I'm glad they had to test it, so extensively before they allowed them to do it in people. And it wasn't just some guy in his garage lab, haha, I have the the cure, trying to sell it to me like a guy selling apples or something like that. So I just have a tough time seeing the decrease in power, people relinquishing power, and then also how things like food safety and environmental protection and stuff like that would work.
Well, that one I think we touched on in our first video of if there was a need in the market that something would probably appear. And I think I know that we think that we're covered with the FDA, but there's numerous examples of corruption or letting drugs in that were not safe for people. And so there's kind of this idea of security theater. I think in a voluntary society would be a much better mechanism, because that need would exist. And they make UL listings is kind of the same thing, except just with material pieces and parts. That's private. There's all kinds of these acronyms and associations that appear in order to help people make decisions on what kinds of things they should purchase. I think there's absolutely would be a need for food and drug safety. But if that was private and there was more than one, if there was the element of competition, so if one place kind of was seen as corrupt or wasting money or whatever, then people wouldn't trust it and they would trust one of the other ones. And so that would come in and say, okay, listen, this is, first of all, it's a company with a reputation. It's not just some guy that said, hey, I've been cooking up this stuff and it cures cancer. obviously you're not going to go with that guy. Although if you want to buy whatever he's selling out of the back of his car,
You should be
I
allowed
think
to.
you're right to be stupid. That's perfectly fine with me. But I think that those mechanisms could exist. And yeah, obviously what we talk about is what should a society look like? Now, do I think we're going to get there? Fuck no. No, we're screwed. We're on a path to collapse. I think we're all going to be living in micro apartments, and our future is going to be like China. We're going to have social credit scores. We're going to have chips in our arms. We're going to watch TV, and it's going to be nonsense. And they're going to control what we think and say, and that's the future. We're going to live in some kind of technocracy dystopian future, and all of this is just a fun little exercise to determine what could it be in a better society. So I think it's still good to have what should the society move towards. Obviously, if that means that I got to go start another one in Costa Rica or somewhere, so be it. But
Right.
that's kind of my plan. So if I can find enough people that agree with me of what a society should look like, then come on down Costa Rica, somewhere in the South. I think houses are cheap, but we'll see. They're starting to shut down our passports, so it might not be an option.
I've seen that, dude, and that also scares me. And I agree with you, man. Have you seen the movie? I think it's called Ready Player One, and I think it's actually set in Columbus, Ohio. But it's literally people in like
Flavortown.
like basically like Flavortown. It's basically people who are like in these little like small tiny apartments, and all they do is like escape from their life in virtual reality, and play these virtual reality games, and that's kind of all they do is exist in these like 300 square foot spaces. And I'm like, dude, we're
That's
getting
us, man.
pretty damn close. That I feel like we're almost there. That's kind of what we're doing right now, right? Like,
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah.
It was
So
like Japan.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know anything about like the replacement rate in Japan, but they're not going to have any of the opposite sex to reproduce with here in the next few years. I was reading something not very long
Is that
ago.
Japan or China?
It's Japan. I want to say that the average like 25-year-old, 22-year-old has never had any kind of like fornication with the opposite sex.
That makes me sad.
And
Yeah.
like their replacement rate is like crazy low, lower than the United States. I can't remember what the replacement rate is here, but it's lower than it should be to sustain things over time. But Japan is in a bad spot as far as that goes.
And one thing that like tweaked me out when it came into being, you talked about social credit score. When they came out with Uber ratings, and I was like, oh shit, you get rated, and like
It goes both ways.
yeah, I'm like, damn, this is a thing now. Like, I can't be too drunk. I can't be like, I got to be super nice. Like, and I'm like, damn, I looked at mine and like, it was like a 4.8 something. I'm like, who's the asshole that gave me less than a 5? You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, whoa, this is kind of tweak, man. I could see how this could be, taken to the extreme.
Oh yeah.
People say the slippery slope is a fallacy, but dude, you fucking keep seeing it. I mean, you talked about income tax earlier, you know what I mean? And how it's just, been a slippery slope. And I think once you erode away at what, people are okay with, you just keep taking and taking and taking. And I feel like we're on that path, man, no matter kind of which way we go, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys think that there are enough people like us to not allow this to happen? Like, do you think that it's the minority yells the loudest and it's just kind of what is popular and it has taken off, or seems much larger than it actually is? Or do you think that things are slowly like creeping in the wrong direction?
Definitely in the wrong direction, but I think there are a lot of people like us. That's kind of what my group is trying to find more people like us. Just, liberal minded, kind of freedom, individualist kind of people. But I think the avenues for finding those types of people are shrinking, and it's going to be more and more difficult to find that kind of person. And I think a lot of those types of people are going to become kind of more isolated, and feel kind of like an outlier. And I think some of that will be manufactured, but I see it in social media where it's just everything's becoming these just few companies in social media, and for some reason nobody's really put like an effort to like create an alternative that's viable. And you see they'll loudly censor and like remove pages and groups and channels and whatnot, but then they quietly remove others that are completely valid, that are completely, perfectly fine. One that comes to mind, there's kind of a cult following of it. It was called Liberty Memes. It was probably, they had 500,000 followers. They did funny memes. They were also both focused on like a voluntary society, so they were like um, contributing. Like they would pool their money together and like help a person that was kind of poor, or just needed a meal, needed pizza Friday or something like that. They weren't like pro police. They're pretty libertarian, and you couldn't point to anything that was not kosher with this page. And they found a way, probably just because they were too big and kind of too counter, to punish them and get rid of them. And now they're a small page. They probably have like 30,000 followers. But you're starting to see more and more of that, and that's scary. We're becoming a society quickly that doesn't that doesn't honor free speech, and not just as a technicality of like, well, technically it's a private. We don't value it as a fundamental belief anymore. There needs to be like the moment that people squash free speech is the moment that the vast majority of people needed to go, I'm out. See ya. You sold this idea that it's an open platform, that you're not going to be partisan, that you're not taking, and then everybody just came to you, and that's a fraud, because clearly there is a motivation. And once you got everybody here, now you start plucking at who you want to be quiet and what kind of people you seem to want to isolate. And that's what we've seen with like shadow banning, for example. Just people behind closed doors, people behind cloaks that are going, okay, let's take his voice away and their voice away and their voice away. And then all of a sudden, everything looks exactly the same. Looks the same as your universities, looks the same as everybody's opinion in Hollywood, looks the same as everybody's opinion in social media. And we just keep marching in this same direction. So I have no hope. I think it's going to continue. And whether there's enough people like us or not isn't the question. It's how do we find each other? And I don't see that getting easier.
I think that's true, and that's as kind of leading into that is that the biggest difference that I see between call it the far left and the far right is that the far right has almost no platform, like at all. I mean, they have like the Daily Stormer, and that's it. And they're almost irrelevant, really. I mean, there's a lot of people who yell about them, so they're kind of like there's some of them that keep kind of like floating to the surface, but it's such a small minority of people, and it's been essentially unacceptable thought, speech, etc. for so long that they're pretty irrelevant. And but the biggest difference is that cannot be said for most people on the far left. They do have a platform, and they are given opportunities to perpetuate a lot of the like destructive things that we see today. And I don't know how we get to a place where that's no longer a thing. I do share your sentiment, TJ, that I basically don't know that there's anything that we can do to stop it at this point.
I know I'm looking for land, trying to decide where exactly I want to live, trying to at least get out of Dodge. Corey, to answer your original question, I think it's both. I think it's multifaceted. I think there is just loud minority on either side, and I think there's a hyper focus on them because what makes the best clickbait, but the crazies, and so then you start seeing these articles, and then it normalizes it as people are like, well, maybe I do agree with them, because they keep seeing this stuff and thinking that's the prevailing paradigm, and that's not the case. And so I do think that it's a combination. And I'm curious what you guys think about this, though, because there's a difference that I see in the far left and the far right, in that it seems like the right is rooted in things staying the same, status quo, like, let's kind of not change. I think with that comes this holding on to what people might perceive as archaic ideas. And I think it's not ours to judge per se, but I think that's, perhaps where you still see, let's just say the racists of today are not voting Democrat for the most part. The KKK and the neo-Nazis of today, I wouldn't say are Democrats on the left. Or I think the left is by nature, progressive and focused on, changing with the times. And I think that gets taken to the extreme. So I think you do still have, those fringe beliefs on either side. But to me, it doesn't seem like, one side versus the other. It kind of seems like the ball versus the chain, almost, if you will. Like the chain is kind of trying to pull, the right, come with us, come with us, come with us. And I think that's where you see some of that. Well, no, your beliefs suck, so we don't want, let's get you off our platforms and blah blah blah. Instead of letting people hash out their ideas and come to their own conclusions, type of thing. I don't know. There's a lot there, but
there is a lot there. I would say I agree with you as far as the voting block of racists, or at least of people who are overtly racist.
That's exactly what I mean by it.
Yeah. And I knew what you meant, but I do think it's an important distinction.
Definitely.
Because, there are an awful lot. I would, even though they're a small minority, I would say the majority of that minority on the far right who are racist, I mean, it's not even a question. They are the people, they vote for Trump. They will vote for anybody on the right, and that's fine. And I do think that Trump, whether intended or not, has given them some things to cheer about, and I think that that's stupid, like on more levels than just politically. But I do think that it's an important distinction to say, okay, sure, yeah, the overt racists, align with the right. The call them shadowy racists, I would argue many of them are on the left. And whether that is via lower expectations, well, I mean, there's all of these things. Like I've listened to so many people, most recently John McWhorter, on like the racism that is low expectations, and I do think that there's a lot of there in that.
Sure.
And it goes completely against the grain about treating everybody equally, that all three of us have been talking about, like, is ultimately the end game that we want. I just don't. There are instances where, again, shitty things happen to shitty people, but if you don't get a job because your name's Dominique and it's spelled in a stereotypical way, rather than being named Danielle, that's a shitty situation for that person. Do I think that, the government should come in with a large hand and try to quote unquote correct that? No, I don't. Again, going back to kind of when there were laws on the books that were objectively racist, I think the government did the right thing in, abandoning those laws or getting rid of them. But they were laws that were put on the books in the first place by government. It was not just, government did not just come in and correct the situation. I said something, and I'm not the first person to say it, but government has a long track record of being both arsonist and firefighter, and they do a lovely job of being the arsonist more so than the firefighter. The other thing that I would say, as far as distinguishing left from right, you pointed out archaic ideas and sort of traditional thought. There are an awful lot of archaic ideas that are based in just straight up truisms. So, I think that that's right. I think that there are a lot of, conservative people who cling to their guns and religion, and they're viewed in a unfavorable light because of so. But that just because the vehicle in which they get to a truism, I don't think should matter. If you meditate and you get to the same place that somebody does by going to church, what do you care?
No, I agree 100%. I personally believe that there is truth in every religion, every philosophy. There's some element of truth. I believe there's a good song in every genre of music. And I also think it's like, all in how you look at the world. Like, there's a quote I like that's like, it's essentially, it might have been Lex Luthor. It was like, some people can read War and Peace and think it's an adventure story. Some people can read the back of a gum wrapper and walk away with the secrets of the universe. So I think that plays into it too. So yeah, man, I could see how that, I didn't mean by archaic to paint all the, ideas and things like that as archaic, but I think that by nature, the older ideas, by the nature of what conservatism is, would be, kind of fall into that conservative camp. That's not to say that all of them need to change, but it seems like by the nature of the way things are set up, if anything does need to change, it would initially be there. So I think that's just kind of like, perhaps a truism of the nature of things.
I think that's fair. I think I know what you mean when you say these things. I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just, one other thing that I would say is there has never been a point, not that I'm immediately aware of, in the last, 100 and some odd years, that we have ever moved further to the right. It has always been further to the left. More power for government, more spending, more taxation, like all of these things, and seemingly things continue to get worse. There's never been a time where we have done a hard shift to the right.
Wasn't there a Supreme Court ruling though?
What's that?
Wasn't there a Supreme Court ruling that was pretty? I forget which one. Gosh dang it! It wasn't DACA. It was. There was one that had a conservative majority, like a Supreme Court ruling. I forget which one it is. It's slipping my mind for some reason. But
I guess I'm speaking. I'm not talking about like at a micro level. I'm talking more at like a macro level. Like we have just continuously moved further left, and that goes for the right as well. Conservatives. Take for example, many conservatives are now in favor of legalizing marijuana. Like 30 years ago, that would have never been a thought for them. They have moved further to the left, where, the left has not moved further to the right. The left has moved further to the left. And I don't know, I see that as being a problem personally.
I guess that's like kind of what I'm saying though, in that like I think that's not even really like a two-side thing. It's kind of like I see the marijuana debate as a positive evolution of society. If it gets to the point where everyone thinks that this is the change that should happen, then it should probably happen. And I think that it's presented as movement to the left. I don't know. I feel like it's just a movement in the direction that everyone wants to see. What are some moves to the right that you think people want that haven't been perhaps like listened to or anything like that?
If you wouldn't mind me, let me touch on some of the stuff.
Oh yeah, please do.
And then I'll answer that question. I think that there's a difference between what we call left-wing racism and right-wing racism. So if I were to look at policies and like ideology, I think that left-wing policy is way more destructive to Black people, or just minorities in general. I think that there's a tendency to use the plight of Black people, and I think this is just a difference in politics. And this is kind of what LBJ kind of figured out, is that use the plight of Black people for political power. Meaning, to me, there's nothing more like what we call right-wing racism is somebody, going like, I don't want my daughter marrying a Black guy, or, why is a Black quarterback on my team or whatever. It's usually just kind of bullshit nonsense. Just some redneck that, okay, but everybody ignores them and whatnot. But left-wing racism is destructive. It is the bigotry of low expectations. It is using the plight of Black people to solve none of their problems and then make their problems my own problems. Meaning I'm going to hide behind their movements to gain political power and, do nothing to address any of their issues. So I think we all three of us agree that one major issue in the Black community specifically is the lack of fathers. Is there a disagreement about that?
No, I think objectively you can look at data over time and see that there was a period that there were more nuclear families in the Black household than there are today. Although I think it's trending in the right direction, certainly, but I do think there's a significant difference in today and the days of old.
And there's objective data to show how much better a person's life is with a father in the home compared to not having the father in the home. Just how much more likely you are to commit crime, to have a kid out of wedlock, to not go to finish school, to become homeless, to kill people, to be in jail, like all of that. There's just massive amounts of objective data showing just how important it is to have a father in the home. And fighting against that is politically incorrect almost. We can't address that because the left is not interested in addressing that, because that's actually trying to solve problems. That's actually going in and saying, hey, let's talk about this. Let's figure out a policy to fix this. Another issue is education. A right-wing position is that we want voucher systems, or we want to stop attaching money to the school. We want to attach the money to the student, and then don't build a school, don't have any teachers, don't have anything. And then a marketplace will come in to say, okay, there's $12,000 attached to every student, and an abundance of schools. It could be a micro school. One teacher has 8 kids. It could be so many different mechanisms of schooling. This is the vision we want for schooling. Now, the progressives have no interest in solving this issue or even listening to this, because they want political control. That's extremely racist to me, in the sense that you are damaging, millions of kids for the rest of their life by not saying, you know what, is there a better mechanism that could work? Or do we want control over their education? Do we want to keep, teachers unions funded that feeds back into the Democratic Party? Do we want to solve any issue in any ghetto, in any inner city in which it's 100% Democrat rule, from the DA to the mayor to whatever. I see a presidential candidate on the Democratic side that was against desegregation of schools. So I don't know how that can be considered not racist. I see the prime minister in Canada wore blackface on several occasions. He's not fired or removed from positions. So I think some of the racism that's rampant isn't even wildly talked about. And I think that's just about what ideologies control media and therefore the spotlight of what we're going to cover. So I think that kind of racism, that just kind of stupidity, ignorance, rampant racism exists on both sides. I think it's highlighted on the right. And I think that the damaging institutional racism comes from progressive policy that was more interested in gaining political power, and from Marxist movements that seem to attach themselves to anything of black interest because they're more interested in using racial tension for political power. And it's a kind of a brilliant move because it forces people who are racist to be against it, but they might be against it so maybe that's one of the reasons why, there's like 3,000 KKK members in the entire country, but maybe the reason they identify with the Republican Party is because the Democratic Party has become no longer liberal. It is a left-leaning, illiberal party who are active anti-racists, not just interested in achieving racial harmony and, the like. I see a lot of similarities, honestly, with progressives today and, Democrats in before 1965, for example, where under both conditions, a person is defined primarily by their group identity, and I think this is kind of the stuff that we wanted to touch on was kind of the difference between liberal and leftist, because I think that's an important distinction to make. I don't think it's always progress too. I showed you that what California removed from their state constitution.
Yeah.
Basically removing the civil rights. Let's see what it is. This part of the Constitution: it shall be illegal for an employer or government entity to discriminate because of race, religious creed, color, national origin, ancestry, physical disability, mental disability, etc. That's what they removed from their state constitution in order to be able to discriminate. So in many ways, we see, what seems like progress isn't progress.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I would bring up that I tend to stay away from is the immediate assumption that people are doing things because they don't want to solve problems. I will say, I do think that people, whether it be on the left or the right, quote unquote, like at the top, who like really understand how things are going, I do think there are probably some people with not great intentions. But by the time that filters down to, kind of just the average person, I do think that the average person just thinks that, hey, I'm trying to solve this issue the best way that I know how. That's typically what I think. And I have, unless I have, call it evidence to, and or know otherwise that an individual is just acting, out of spite or, in some way that is not like honorable, I just assume that they kind of don't know what they're talking about, for lack of better ways of putting it. But the problem that I have, to touch on something that you were talking about, is that you can't, stigmas have worked for a long, long, long time, and now it's racist or in some other way improper to associate something, like fathers in the home, for example. So to say that, hey, that is our pinnacle, that's what we strive for, that's what we want to achieve, either as a culture or society or what have you. I think that it is a problem in the Black community, but I think it's a much larger problem in the United States as a whole. What I don't get is, like Black Lives Matter, for example, like in their mission statement specifically says, that the nuclear family is a problem, when every shred of evidence suggests just the opposite. And it's things like that like, I don't even know how they're taken seriously on like a bunch of different levels, up to and including that one.
Yeah, what is your thoughts on that, Ryan? Just the fact that the leaders of the Black Lives Matter organization are admitted Marxists, and a lot of the mission statement is influenced by Marxism. What's your opinions on that?
I think, for one, it's frustrating because I think there's a lot of legitimacy in some of the complaints that we are seeing today and the changes that people do want to make. So I think what happens is the movement gets characterized as the Black Lives Matter movement, and then when people hear things like, oh yeah, the leaders are Marxist, they just go ahead and say, oh, nope, fuck your cause. And just want to, just discredit it based on that notion alone. So I think that that's frustrating because it just like allows people to be dismissive. At the same time, I think there are a lot of words that get thrown around today that like, I'm not even sure if anyone knows what they mean anymore, to be honest. I don't think we work under the same definitions. So, a lot of these like socialist, you're communist, you're racist, you're, a lot of the ist words that get thrown around, Marxist being one as well. So that's why I like to I don't know, understand like what people mean when they say Marxist. I had a conversation with a guy and I asked him, I was like, hey, what's your definition of Marxist? And he like got pissed off at me. He was like, oh, like, really, like, definition of Marxist, like, look it up. You can look it up, dude. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, dude, like, first of all, people have different definitions of stuff. Like if I say like, patriotism, I'm sure you think of certain things, but, certain people think of different things. Like
equality.
Right. Yeah. What does that even mean? So I think, a lot of people have asked my opinion on, Marxist ideology and stuff like that lately. And I'm like, I stay away from it, man. I'm not an ist. I'm not anything. I don't really know what it means. I've looked a little bit into, what Marx was talking about. I'm trying to think of like, some of the interesting thoughts, like the crisis of overproduction, or like, how marriage has become a financial interest is at the center of marriage, and people don't necessarily pursue love and things like that with true interests. I don't think those are invalid criticisms, but I don't think Marx really talked about what a post-capitalist society really looks like, and I don't think we need a post-capitalist society. Like I think there are problems that exist. We categorize them and call them words, and then people just have a binary response to it. Oh no, that sounds socialist. Nope, not even considering it. Oh no, that sounds racist. Not even considering it. So I think Orwell had it right when he's writing politics in the English language. People are deceptive with their words, and the language is becoming a fucking problem. So like, I don't know. That's why I was curious, like, what you mean about, like, what does Marxism mean to you, and like, what do you see being the problems with it? because I'm not I can't speak intelligently on that at all. I don't want to represent myself as like, an expert on it. Not to say that you are, but just curious about your views
I'll
on
let,
it and stuff.
I'll let TJ touch on that, but, for anybody who's read 1984, I think doublespeak is, pretty interesting. And I think it's important that you personally try to qualify, hey, what do you mean? Or, hey, this is what I mean when I say these certain words. But I can't help but have like a negative reaction almost that we even have to do that. Like, why can't
Right.
what I mean, mean what like, why can't I use a word and have it mean to me what it means to you? You know, Again, there's a lot in there. There's a lot to unpack in that, but it's interesting. And John McWhorter is somebody that I seriously suggest listening to.
Well, he's like a linguist by like profession or something. Like doesn't
Yeah.
he deal in language a lot? Yeah.
Well, when we say Nazi, we all know what that means. I think that all elicits the same kind of reaction. Now, granted, it's overused, to just describe your political enemies. But when we say Nazi, we know that it's bad. Now, why do you think Nazi is bad?
I think you immediately associate it with the extermination of a people based on their ethnicity, totalitarianism, the rise of this wild dictator who went on to cause mayhem and destruction. I think that's why people see it as bad.
Yeah, and I agree, as they should. What I see is that you're right. I mean, not enough people know about Marxism. They don't know about what he preached. They don't know about what it looked like in practice. They don't know about a lot of the atrocities. I mean, they say things like never again, never again, unless at the hands of communists. Then it happens over and over and over again. When I say Marxism, I mean that you see the world through Marx's lens of the world. You see the world as merely a class struggle between two binary groups, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, or more simply, an oppressed group and an oppressor group. And you see any transaction between the two as purely one in which power is like the predeterminator and the bourgeoisie have all the power. So things like employment or landlording are equated as evil. It's exploitation is his framing. And so what he sought was a collectivist revolution, not a society in which individuals say, you know what, I also want to be a landlord. I want to be this. One in which everybody joined together. There's nothing to break but your chains or whatever. It's a call to the disenfranchised, the oppressed, to rise up against a collectivist evil. And it's very similar to Nazism. Nazism, the Jews were the successful at the time, and Hitler's problem with the Jews is that he hated capitalism and he hated bankers, and he associated Judaism with controlling, their institutions. And so Mein Kampf is a similar read of oppressed, oppressor, where these are our grievances. And they both, so with Nazism and Marxism, they both collectivize, and group identity is most important. There is no individual. It's a collectivist ideology. And they justify and dehumanize Nazi on the basis of race and religion, and Marxism on the basis of class and politics. And that's the only distinction that I see. And they've both justified mass evils. I think, 8 million as a result of Hitler. Communists, 100 million people in the last century. Numerous atrocities of taking people's lands who were farming and saying, all right, you have to all go to Siberia and them having to just starve in nothing land with their kids, and they're eating each other's kids.
They
and
sent
they're
them to die,
with
dude.
them saying like, hey, remember, don't eat your kids, and just fucked up shit. Where then they're rationing, there's slave labor. Marx was a proponent. So he defines labor as exploitative, and then defines he is in favor of a system that seeks involuntary labor, essentially, where everybody must contribute and work for basically the state, and that was brought into practice where people were forced under Mao or Stalin to farm the fields, plow the fields, do whatever. So I think when we zoom out, when we go through everywhere that Karl Marx's ideas have been practiced, it's led to massive horrors. Firing lines, just piles of dead bodies, the killing fields in Cambodia, atrocity after atrocity after atrocity. And for whatever reason, and I think because his ideas resonate with a lot of the kind of the ideology in half the country, I think it's very similar to progressive ideology. And I think that's why it's gotten a pass, because it's not covered in schools. It's not covered in the universities. It's not covered on TV. The History Channel only covers Hitler atrocities. But if the History Channel was also devoting to Cuba and Venezuela and Russia and China, then we would all kind of have this kind of visceral response in the same way that we do with Nazism. I think that's a big issue, is that people don't have that when it comes to Marxism, because they don't know what he stood for, and they don't know what it looked like in practice, and they don't know just how similar it was to Hitler. But there's a long line of covering up not communist atrocities. Like, have you ever heard of Walter Duranty? Walter Duranty was the New York Times reporter, and he won a Pulitzer Prize because of his coverage in Ukraine. Well, what he did was not cover the fact that Ukraine was having mass starvation, because Stalin had went in, or I think Lenin had went in and commandeered the land of the productive, removed them from their farms, sent them out to Siberia, and naturally millions of people starved because those are people producing your food. So obviously, if you get rid of the farmers, people die. So Walter Duranty didn't cover that at all. When a Pulitzer, and admitted afterwards that he basically knew that millions had died, and that kind of, if we had known that, World War II might have ended differently. We might have not stopped with the Nazis. We might have marched on and not given Eastern Europe to the communists. But we didn't know that, and the public didn't know that. And as a result, I mean, imagine if Walter Duranty did the same thing with Auschwitz. Discovered Auschwitz, went, the Nazis treated me pretty well. He showed me around. There's not, a few thousand people were dead. There's no big deal. You imagine how just up in arms people would be about that story? But no, we don't know that story. And the New York Times still has the Pulitzer Prize. They never really gave it back or admitted any kind of wrongdoing. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why when we zoom out, we might see things that are different. You might see the black and gold dress, and I might see the white and blue dress. I probably messed that up. But I think it's important because sometimes we might see, let's say, Colin Kaepernick. And if you know the evils of communism, if you know Marxism, you might see somebody who stands up for what he believes in and he's willing to take a knee. I might see somebody that's pointing to something that I think is more of a media issue. But my biggest issue with Colin Kaepernick, for example, is he speaks fondly of Che Guevara and Cuba and Fidel Castro. And to me, that's the equivalent of if he wore a fucking Hitler shirt. And I think there's this translation that doesn't appear, because if you don't know just the atrocities, just how horrible communism has been, anybody who's an apologist or is okay with it is repulsive. It's just absolutely repulsive. And I think that's one of those things in which, and we can, as we get more into like Marxism and critical theory and postmodernism and all these things that we touched on, I think the fundamental difference between me and a lot of people, maybe me and you, Ryan, is when we break it down, when we break down our core values, our core beliefs, we come to the table and we go, you know what? Yeah, I agree. 95% of the time, we have very similar fundamental values, which means we can build something because now we have a foundation, and then we can agree on this and this and this, which is why we're able to have a conversation. Because just like if you're in a relationship, anybody who's in a relationship, if you don't have the foundation, you don't have shit. Get out of that relationship. If you don't have something agreed upon, you have nothing that you can build. And you see a lot of guys and girls that, oh, they like each other, they play video games and they fuck, but they don't have any of the core values. If you're in one of those relationships and you're trying to build, get the fuck out. That's just a side note. But I think you and I have been presented with a shiny box, shiny, beautiful box. And it might say things like equality or social justice or good words, where we might look at, and this is not you specifically, but just a general you of people that are similar, that you align with, I guess, politically. We both see a shiny, beautiful box. I think the difference is that I've seen the inside of the box, and the inside of the box is anywhere close to the outside of the box. And so I don't like the box, but people see me not liking the box, or people like me not liking the box, and go, you don't like that box? Look at this beautiful box. Look at this, beautiful wooden horse. Why wouldn't you be for equality and social justice and this and that and the other thing? And our challenge, obviously, there's people that just are racist and are against the outside of the box fundamentally, and I'm not talking about that. But I'm saying a lot of people know what's inside the box, and they see it and they go, I don't like that box. And I think it's their challenge to come in and tell people, this is what at least I perceive of what the inside of the box looks like. And perhaps if more and more people can describe the inside of the box, then there's more people that go, ooh, maybe I don't want this box. Maybe it is a Trojan horse in a way. So I don't know if you have anything to say to that.
No, I think that's interesting. The notion of a Trojan horse, because on the outside, if you look at even some of the things that Mark said, and just for the nature of this video, if it gets clipped, let me put the disclaimer in again. I am not a Marxist. I'm not a ist. My name is Ryan Danley, and I believe what I believe. This is me giving a quote and evaluating the quote. Marx said, for as soon as the distribution of labor comes into being, each man has a particular exclusive sphere of activity which is forced upon him and from which he cannot escape. He is a hunter, a fisherman, a herdsman, or a critical critic, and must remain so if he does not want to lose his means of livelihood. While in I know the evil word, communist society, where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes, society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind, without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic. Now, I hear that, and if you take out things like society regulating general production and communist society and stuff like that, the last part of that quote, to hunt in the morning, to fish in the afternoon, to rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, without becoming a hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic, that to me sounds like fucking liberty. If I think about it from a fundamental standpoint, what is liberty? What is freedom? It's the ability to do what the fuck I want when I want to do it. So that's why when people ask me if, do you agree with Marx and stuff like that, it's like, I don't 100% agree with anybody. Part of what he's saying sounds legit to me. But I think it is not dissimilar to what you're saying and, your pursuit of, individual rights and liberty and, equal protection under the law. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think you can find quotes of some of the worst people in history and still agree with them. I think what he's most known for, and what the movements that he actually helped that were built in his image, were evil and horrible. Obviously, he's not for liberty. He's not even for um, individuals to make transactions with other individuals freely. You know, he equates that to exploitation. He wants he's in favor of a violent revolution. So I think we can see stuff that we might like, but for what he's known for, what it plays out as. And I'm not even saying, I think he's more of an idiot than an evil person. I think he's riddled with inconsistencies. He calls, like I said, labor exploitation, and then he had a maid. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a lot of it is that he was an academic, and he envisioned this utopian world that, you know, he kind of resented his successful father and other people that, you know, he was horrible with money. He was utopia. And I don't make the claim that he's the equivalent um, of an evil person. His ideology is. So Darwin is what spurred a lot of Marxism. It's kind of it was the ability to say that the Enlightenment. I reject the Enlightenment because it has some baggage from maybe religious fundamentalism. It has some basis of wisdom and God. And Darwin has thoroughly gotten rid of any notion of God. And human beings are nothing more than animals. That's kind of the breakdown. So I think it's more stupidity. It's Marxism is taking Darwin, and Darwin I completely agree with, but there's no social ramifications from Darwin. So any social science that's pulled from the work of Darwin is just subjective. It's pseudoscience. It's what you want to believe. It's saying, be able to say, okay, humans are animals, and this and this and this, and building upon just data. Just this is how humans came about, and then allowing you to say, well, we reject this, and now I can go on with my own view and define things and power relationships and this oppressed binary and collectivize people as evil. And that's what it justified. It allowed people after him to go, yeah, they have all the land, even though they're just poor peasant farmers that have maybe a couple acres and a couple cows. They're the power structure. They're evil. Let's justify any sort of evil and take from them. And so, yeah, we can read Mein Kampf and find things that he's got a point there. But the overwhelming arc of what he produced and what was done in his name is atrocious. It's distasteful. It's collectivist. The group identity is primary. I think it's in practice is a very evil ideology, much the same as Nazism.
I agree very much as it pertains to the group identity with what you're saying, because if you see the world in a way where you believe there to always be an oppressor and oppressed, your worldview becomes one where you look at every group that way, and people don't belong to just one group. Like, I'm a man, I'm also a black man, I'm also, handicapped now, I'm also a millennial. I belong to all these groups, and in some of these groups I may be perceived as an oppressor, and so I think it does set a dangerous precedent to view the world that way. And I see how that could be a huge problem. And yeah, man, I think the destruction that's come historically is fucking terrible. I guess one thing that seems interesting though is maybe Marxist ideas aren't the best. I'm not endorsing them or anything like that. It seems though that any criticism of the current system is shut down with this notion that it's it's socialist, that it's communist, that it's kind of like the whole racist thing now. It's like if you say, like earlier you guys were saying if you say anything that kind of disagrees, you're called a racist. I kind of feel like now if you criticize capitalism or anything that kind of comes with it, you're called a communist or, a Marxist and so I feel like that kind of, adds to the confusion of things. And it's also kind of shuts down discourse, which I think is dangerous, because if you think about, the Enlightenment, it was all about, like truth and stuff like that, and objective truth. And I think in order to find objective truth, you need discourse. So I guess you do see that from both sides too these days. Like I don't know, fuck, maybe we do need to go find an island, bro. Like, I don't know.
I completely agree. Most people don't know what words mean. They're dumb people seek to dismiss. And I think thoughtful, smart people want to discuss and debate and open things up. And yeah, I certainly think you see that from both sides. I think most people are just kind of ignorant and don't have much to contribute. And I think that's what kind of Twitter's for, and just letting people, like anybody who engages in the semantic debate of all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter, I immediately ignore. I'm like, well, that person has nothing of any depth whatsoever. They are on just some stupid, shallow, nonsensical argument. I think everybody's interested in dismiss. You're just a communist. You're just a Marxist. You're just whatever, without knowing. And it sucks because it on both sides it desensitizes people to that word. Right. Nazi should mean something. If
it means nothing anymore. It means nothing anymore.
It's like, oh, he voted Republican back in '94. Okay, who gives a shit? But the same thing goes for Marxists or communists or socialists. It's just like, oh yeah, great, whatever, because he thinks that this. I think any criticism of capitalism, of Western civilization, of America, is completely fair, and it should just be about it shouldn't be about dismissing you as a person. It should be, okay, you lobbed this criticism, I'm going to address this criticism.
Right.
That's Enlightenment values. And I think that's what our videos have kind of been, is here's this criticism. I've never said, you Marxist, get the
right.
hell out of here.
Right,
okay,
right.
This specific criticism. I'm going to talk about this specific criticism. So I completely agree. It happens on both sides. There's dumb people on both sides. I mean, as George Carlin said, think about how dumb the average person is. Now realize that half of them are even dumber than that.
Half of them, dude. Half of them. 50%, man.
Are even dumber than that.
Yeah.
So, there's just the problem with social media is that everybody gets to speak and everybody thinks their voice matters, and most of them don't. Most of them are trash opinions, barely informed. They're not thoughtful. They're not seeking more information. No one can be wrong. No one can be like, you know what? I don't really know about that topic. Oh, or I was here and I went, now I'm over here. I learned some more information.
You flip-flopper.
Right. Inconsistent person who gains knowledge over life. What a jackass.
Look at you growing as a person.
Right. So, there's just a lot of people that just aren't, I guess, worth your time. But I have no excuse for anybody that just uses those words aimlessly. I think it does more harm than it does good. And it's just, let me dismiss you so I don't have to talk to you and still feel like I'm the better human being. That's just what it is.
Yeah, man. That's definitely a thing that I'm seeing more and more of. And it's frustrating because when public discourse breaks down and, people fall more and more into their silos, then, how divided do you think we'll be, and how easily manipulated do you think will be, if we can't exchange ideas with each other. So I hate a lot of, what I'm seeing in terms of, people being, quote, canceled and stuff like that. I don't think it's a new phenomenon. People think it's a new phenomenon. I think people have been tarring and feathering people for fucking ever and exiling them from the community since the beginning of time. So I think it's just a new word for an old idea. But I don't like it because it never allows people the chance to redeem themselves, to work on themselves, to say some stupid shit when they're 12 years old and then be like, damn, maybe I was wrong.
Now some of the stuff that you get canceled for, I think there was a feminist that stated that men are not women. I think that was what she said on Twitter, and she got deleted from Twitter. She got removed from Twitter. Like, now it's gotten to the point that people say valid, sensible things and they're gone.
I think that was J.K. Rowling.
No, it was a God. I heard her name today. It was there's a tennis player that complained about that men tennis players, trans women or whatever the hell it is, shouldn't be able to compete against actual females, and she got lambasted. I'm not quite sure if she got deleted. And then another example was like a feminist writer that had said, and I do remember this when it actually happened, that men are not. She was responding to somebody and said, "Men are not women, though," and then she was removed from Twitter.
Man,
So we got that.
I have something. I don't mean to like completely switch gears, but you know, I don't want this to be like too long where people, just aren't going to listen to it at all. But and maybe this is something you don't even put on video, right? Because I don't know how.
Well, if we're going to talk about video, like how we're going to release it, I would suggest we cut it up and not release maybe release the whole thing afterwards, but cut that out, by the way. Don't have that.
right. Yeah. We'll get some clips and stuff for sure, dude.
I'm really interested in, it's really hard. I compete. I have like this competing view, like when the three of us text about kind of like these thought-provoking ideas. It's very hard to do that through text.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to touch on a little bit and not make it like, an all-night thing, but your thoughts on whether they've progressed at all since you sent the video on like the anarchism video, and like what your just overall thoughts on that are, because I see a lot of the things that were presented in that video as mutually exclusive. I was kind of trying to explain that through text. I probably didn't do the best job, but to just give you a very quick example, all that he talks about is people being, totally free to kind of do what they want, so long as you contribute to society, because you'll be forced to do that, and you support the feminist movement, you support Black Lives Matter, you support the trans movement, etc. And it's like, okay, well, the key tenet of anarchism is like defiance of the state, not wanting this overarching kind of billy club, mechanism that is going to compel you to do these certain things. But then he also talks about, like, right on the backside of, hey, everybody will be free. Well, you have to do these things. Well, you can't have that, but then also not have somebody enforce that. So which one is it? And I just see that's one small example, but there were a ton of things that I saw as mutually exclusive, and that is largely why I don't agree with it. I see no validity in it, and I think a lot of people conflate it with libertarianism, and the biggest difference between anarchism and libertarianism is libertarians don't want that billy club, to be swung at people, to either to fit their narrative or not. At least the majority of the people who are real libertarians. So.
Yeah. So man, I won't say that. Again, I'm not too firm in like anything. Part of the reason that I've been, talking to you guys and talking to everyone is I'm on a pursuit of discovering my truth and what I believe to be objective truth. I won't say my truth. I'll say objective truth. I'll say that, I really want to figure out, what are the things that are right in the world? What is the system that would be best for us? I think a thing that made me interested in the idea of pursuing anarchy to see what it means. In pursuing, I mean like reading more into it, is the way that it was first defined to me was a system without leaders. by nature, I don't like anyone telling me what to do. That's just who I've always been, growing up. I don't like a boss. I don't like, I don't like that. And so, to hear it defined that way, I was like, okay, let me look more into this. So I'm like you. I don't see how it works without enforcement. I don't see how a lot of these ideas work without enforcement. And that's why I think a lot of them just aren't realistic. When I heard libertarianism described, I don't know if it was Milton Friedman or who it was, but there's extreme libertarianism, where it's considered immoral to initiate force on anyone, versus consequential libertarianism, which is minimum amount of government, the maximum amount of freedom. And that too, I'm like, yeah, minimum amount of government, maximum amount of freedom. Like, that sounds good. But then I think about the fact that I don't know, man. Regulation and stuff like that. Like, some regulations are good. I think, in my opinion, there's been some good regulation. A lot of it's bad. A lot of government is inefficient. Why are we giving 1.4 or 1.7 million dollars to dead people with this stimulus check, and however much it was? So I guess I'm trying to see what elements of these things all make sense to me, and I hope to find some sort of system where you can incorporate the best ideas from each and get rid of the garbage from all of them, And I don't know what that amalgamation looks like, but I feel like perhaps it could be something.
Yeah, I mean, and I was just trying to get, your idea. I mean,
Straight
I
up,
think
yeah.
I think all of us are in that same camp. We're all, kind of looking, searching, reading, etc., trying to talk to as many people as possible to find objective truth. I was just very curious when you sent that video, and then the three of us were having sort of a text exchange back and forth. It's you almost have to write an essay to kind of unpack some of these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Three of us.
And then you guys you write some clever shit back, and I'm like, damn, I say it and I think about it, and I'm like, man, how do I even feel about this? Or I'm presented with something new, and I'm like, man, I really need to read what he's talking about. I need to watch this video, and I mean, hell, I wish I could show you. Let's see. These are all Post-it notes of stuff that people have told me, and things to check out, and just things like that. So, yeah, dude, it's
I've been keeping a book list. So I try to read or listen to these days. I tend to listen to books while I work. It's just kind of what I do to pass the time. But I try to read/listen to 2 books a week, and I've been keeping a reading list of books that I think are influential. If you're at all interested, it's not super long. I mean, I'm not putting down, everything that I read, but I have a reading list that has some pretty good stuff on it.
I'd love to share that, man. I think that'd be awesome. And I know TJ shared a couple with me, and I'm still working through the law. You said it would take a while, and I was like, man, this little ass book. And then I was like, all right, yeah, I sit with it. I read a paragraph, and I sit with it, and I set it down. And I come back, I read the same paragraph again. I'm like, okay, and then I flip back, and I'm like, damn, okay, this is what he's talking about. I'm like, okay, yeah, I see what he's talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, man, I love that. I've been reading all kinds of stuff. I'm reading this book called Light, the New Medicine right now. That's, talking about how light impacts people, and, things like that, studies that they've done pertaining to light and things. So yeah, I love new stuff like that. It helps me think differently.
I have slotted for next week a book called How to Change Your Mind. It's from Michael Pollan. I don't know if you know who he is, but part of this book talks quite a bit about stoned ape theory, which I presume you know quite a bit about because you were into McKenna.
Yeah, man.
And I'm interested in reading this book. It's all about how essentially psychedelics changed society, and how a lot of religious tenets came from early psychedelics. So that's at a high level what it's about, but you know, I'm excited to read it. So
Yeah. Timothy Leary did an interpretation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead as it pertains to like a ritual with psychedelics, and kind of, I mean, shit, he started this whole wave on psychedelics, and eventually he got shut down by the government. But
yeah,
yeah, man, I think there's more to psychedelics than people know, and I've been really looking into microdosing lately. It's a Torsten Passy, The Science of Microdosing,
yeah,
that talks about different psychedelics and their effects and things like that, on neuroplasticity and nerve growth, and that's why I was
Yeah,
particularly interested
Silicon
in
Valley.
it. Yeah, man.
I think it's psilocybin that with microdosing, like 24 or 36 months later, produces, I don't know, 80 to 85% smoking cessation rates, which is like, you know, just crazy when compared to any of the drugs on the market now to try to help curb that. It's really interesting to, listening to or reading experiences from like cancer patients, and basically how all of their call it angst of death, or I don't know how you would frame that, but essentially like worry and being afraid of things almost unanimously just went away, and completely got rid of any anxiety that they had about it. It's really interesting stuff, and I think that there's a lot, to say the least, that we don't know about psychedelics.
The structure of psilocybin is so similar to serotonin that it connects to serotonin receptors, like your 5-HT receptors in your brain.
And changes you forever.
Yeah. So it's like, that's real, man. We're made for these chemicals. So I think there's something to that. Like, we have an endocannabinoid system. Like, we have these things, and they have these profound effects on us. And I feel like we shouldn't discredit that, and we should perhaps explore it if we do want to get to objective truth. That's part of it as well.
For sure.
Yeah, I need to find some high school kid or somebody. I don't know how do you even get shrooms? Like,
you go to a hippie festival or something, dude. I don't know.
search some cow shit or something.
I mean, shit, they grow naturally in the woods if you know how to identify them, but there's like 50 fucking
with my
thousand.
luck, I'll die.
Yeah,
I'll find one of the ones that kill you.
Yeah, there's so many that look similar. I'm like, how do people even know which ones to pick, dude? I don't even trust myself.
There are some very, 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 very legit studies, a bunch of them actually, out of Johns Hopkins. And actually, a neighbor of mine had some pretty messed up lung cancer, and he was looking into it. Never wound up getting approved for it, but nevertheless was looking into it. And it's just interesting. It's nothing that I'm super interested in doing myself at this point, but I think just like trying to better understand it, because I didn't even know that it was really a thing up until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I know that people in high school used to eat shrooms on a peanut butter sandwich, and stuff like that, but beyond that I had no understanding, no context for any of it, and it is really interesting.
Yeah, man. I'll say theoretically, I've experienced a mushroom trip time or 7 in my life. um, and I will say it had a profound effect on my view of the world, on my ego. Um, and it's the weirdest thing, man. I talk to, I have a buddy that, we get real deep, we get real weird with it when, as it pertains to philosophy and life and stuff. And I told him, man, that the two insights that I brought back from my one soul ego death experience, theoretically, was that we are made of light and that we must flow like water. And that's, the key to life. And I don't know what the fuck that means, but those are kind of, insights that I received and I've been trying to use within my life. And, my interpretation of those has helped guide me. Um, the flow like water thing, I'm like, okay, why am I getting so upset by this? Just go with it, man. Make it the best that you can. Life is a series of, situations that present themselves. Be the best in all of them. Flow like water. And so, that mentality has helped me immensely. And the we are light thing, to me, it was just like, I took it as we were all composed of, the same thing. We are all the same beings. We all are connected to the same universal consciousness. So therefore, I should want the same for myself as I want for someone else. And I think that's the golden rule that's been prevalent in basically every religion that's existed for all of time. The golden rule seems to be this thing that comes into play over and over again. And so that's kind of what I took from it. Not to get too 1970s on you, but
No, it's cool stuff. I have a buddy of mine who claims that his entire life changed, after doing DMT one time, and just says that it is without question the most important thing that he has ever experienced in his entire life. And that's to kind of bring this mostly full circle. Kind of goes back to your point about perception. Like, perception is reality. Like, anything that he experienced may be completely backwards, but it is his perception. And now he claims that his mode of going about things has changed enough in such a short period of time, or did change enough in such a short period of time, that like that's the only thing that he could attribute it to, that it was so real that he would basically be doing himself a disservice if he went against this quote unquote truth that he now knew that he was exposed to through this experience.
Bro, there are a lot of studies that prove that to be the case. MAPS is an organization that studies psychedelics and puts on a lot of these studies that you see at Johns Hopkins and stuff like that. And you talked about data earlier. There's a lot of data to suggest that these substances are helpful. And anecdotally, I swear to you, if everyone tripped on shrooms, if we took tomorrow off and everyone was like, yo, let's just do a couple shrooms, all the shit that we've been talking about would go the fuck away and we would figure it out. I promise you that, brother. I do, man. I think everyone would chill the fuck out, look at life differently, and see it's bigger than the shit that we're arguing about. And they look up at the sky and see the moon and wonder, like, damn, that's a big ass rock that's just floating around us. Oh wait, we're on a big ass rock that's just going around in circles around this giant nuclear explosion that is so big that a photon of light from the center of it takes I think it's like 40,000 years to go from the center to the surface, and then 8 minutes to go from the surface of the sun to the earth. Like if the sun exploded, we'd have 8 minutes to live. Probably be too hot to do anything in like 2 or 3 though. But that's I think you start to look at nature and stuff like that a little bit differently and realize it's bigger than these fucking spreadsheets that we stare at every day.
No kidding.
I think that's what's missing, personally from the Western world a little bit though, is like getting in touch with nature and stuff. And I know you talked about, how people started rejecting religion and stuff like that, and rejecting spirituality and the idea of God. I had that same thing in my life, man. I rejected the idea of God at one point because I was like, I went to a Jewish school and grew up in a Christian household. I'm like, you guys are both telling me you're right. Then I think, both of you are wrong. It all sounds like some bullshit. Um, and I kind of came back to it after, you look at physics and you take that far enough, you get into, quantum physics, you look at mathematics, you look at, all these different disciplines. And I think that there is something divine that is holding us together. People have been saying it for all time, man. And James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, fucking Kevin Hart, The Decision, talks about your mind and how it plays in. Um, this is fucking true, man. These are things that have been passed down and said a million different ways. So
For me, that's obviously something I'm sure everybody struggled with. Is like, especially if you're getting away from religion, you're not religious. You don't have like written down kind of, this is what the point is. This is what the purpose is. Finding that on your own, is it just a matter of like, are we just here and then just jack off and do whatever and then die, or is there like an underlying purpose? I think when you get into quantum physics, it's weird. It's like you can't even comprehend it, but just the implications of it are just so vast.
right.
And I do believe that it kind of points towards sort of like a simulation, that it almost is like a computer program or something, just an extremely powerful computer, which would imply a creator of sorts. But if it's a simulation, then I think that life is about struggle. Because if you play simulation, what's the point of doing anything other than actually participating in the main story arc and finding struggle and then fighting that struggle? And I think for us, I think that's what being a human is taking this time to find truth, to discover truth, to discover objective truth and wisdom. And then when you finally get to that point where you feel like you have painted enough of a picture and have seen the struggle for what it is, you partake in the struggle and you attempt to be successful. So, I mean, for me, that struggle has become people who want to be free versus people who want to control other people. And I see that coming to a head kind of in 2020, 2021. It's part of the reasons why I've been motivated to kind of do what I do on the side with the group, is saying, okay, this is the conundrum. This is the struggle of this ideology has run rampant through this industry and this area and this area and this area. And there's just been seeming to be a powder keg that's just been filling with gunpowder, and someone just lit a match and threw it. And it just feels like this is the year. This is that kind of defining moment where we're on an arc to kind of a miserable existence of just of true struggle, of true just kind of dystopian control. And so I think finding that discovery and finding that wisdom and then saying, okay, this is it. This is the point. It's not to golf or to just get good at this. Those are fun things to do along the way. Don't get me wrong, but that's not the meaning of life. It's not the purpose of life is to play trumpet. It's to, find the struggle and embrace the struggle and see if you can be victorious. So that's kind of where I've come to terms with it, as far as, what's the point? Why am I here? And then kind of creating my own, trying to understand my own purpose.
I think the Buddhists say a lot of what you're saying, man. Life is suffering, and I think that's another thing that kind of holds true. I think on the other side of that suffering, on the other side of that struggle, is greatness. Are you guys familiar with David Goggins?
Heard of him.
Dude, he is perhaps the most badass dude of all time, and I'll send you a video on him. But basically, he was an exterminator that was like 300 pounds. He's overweight, and then he grew up in this small white town. He's a black dude. He got called the N-word every day of his life and stuff like that. Got made fun of. One day he's sitting on his couch and he's watching TV and he's watching the Marines on the History Channel, and he's like, I think I'm gonna do that. And so he just decided to do it. And he was like he's the only person to go through Army Ranger Camp. It's like the three hardest feats in the military. He did all three of them, and he's the only person to ever do that. He's run these 100-mile races and stuff like that. He broke the world record for most pull-ups. And he says that the reason he did that is because of his struggles, is because he faced the dark side of who he is and, chased that instead of comfort. And so I think there's a lot to that, man. When you look at, all the people who've accomplished anything, it wasn't because they were sitting on their ass waiting for somebody to do something for them or give them something or anything. It's because they fucking went out and got it and did what they needed to do despite their external circumstances.
No doubt. Well, what are you guys thinking? There's a lot of stuff that I wanted to get into.
Yeah.
Obviously, this will probably be a 7-hour podcast if we do.
Yeah.
So we might have to save it for another time.
Yeah, I want to be
I feel
mindful.
like we could talk for like days and just be like no sleep, just little shots of Red Bull and
There's some interesting shit I want to get into. I mean,
every once in a while.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I'm down to keep this going, man. And that's why I was like, man, let's just fucking get something on the books because we're sending texts back and forth, and I'm like, I have so much. I think about this. I have so let's chat.
Once it gets too much, I stop looking. I'm like, fuck it, we'll get it in the next video.
Yeah. And man, my apologies for not getting clips chopped up. I realized, if you have a 3-hour video, the minimum amount of time that it takes to do it is 3 hours. You know what I mean? It's naturally longer than that, so it ends up being
I've been doing it with mine, and it's time consuming, man.
It's time intensive, and I've been editing the audio too now that I've learned how to do that. Because I want them to be quality. Because sometimes the audio is pretty bad, and I've figured out how to run them through GarageBand and compress the audio and take out some of this stuff. And so I want people to be receptive to them and stuff, and for them to sound good so they actually listen. So it's been a learning experience, but I'm getting better at it, man. Learning how to animate now too. So
hell yeah,
hopefully get some of that going too.
Nice. Have you seen any of my little videos?
Dude. I like them, man. I started watching. I think it was your third meeting. No, it was the second meeting. I started watching your second
That's
meeting.
The one with the girl with the Cuban.
The girl from Cuba. Yeah. Yep. So I need to finish it, but I think it's fascinating, and that's you said there are a lot of people that that are joining the cause that you feel very intelligent, and I find myself not that I agree with everyone, but understanding where they come from in terms of the way they lay out their arguments, and so it's been fascinating for me to check out, man. So I think it's cool what you're doing, and I appreciate you putting that out there.
Well, I'll extend an invite to both of you. Any time that you guys want to participate. I mean, obviously you don't have to agree with everything in the group or even half of it, but just if you want to sit in and hell, you can feel free to ask questions and be a devil's advocate and kind of push people and be like, well, what do you mean by this? Because you would grant. We're all very similar, obviously, the people in the group, and so you would kind of grant kind of a different perspective and then make us go, okay, how do we succinctly? It would just be challenging, you know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
If any time to sit in, you're either one of you are more than welcome. So
for sure, man. Probably be something I'd be interested in at some point. So
yeah, the goal is just to find people. It's to redefine the struggle. We get caught up in this black versus white, man versus women, or whatever the hell it is. And it's people who want to be free versus people who want control. And, I think we need to redefine the lines, redefine the argument of like I said, the difference between me and a lot of people are what we see in a box, what we see on the outside of the box versus what we see on the inside of the box. But fundamentally, we have some core values. And there are groups of people that have completely different core values. And maybe we can elaborate into our next video, but I think my biggest argument is that what we call the left is actually two groups, liberals and actual leftists, kind of Marxist left. And I think they're merged together, And I think that they're completely diametrically opposed. They don't have a foundation. They shouldn't be married together. But one group is really good at politics, and the other group is like you, Ryan, of just, seeking truth. You want equality, justice, whatever. And I think one group is takes advantage of that. But that's just for another conversation. But I think what my hope is just redefining the lines of like, listen, we agree 95% of this. We want this. And even if there's things that we don't want that the other person wants, let's fight that battle tomorrow. There's obvious battles that need to be fought today. And if we don't win these battles, there will be no battles to fight tomorrow.
Like, let's fucking prioritize,
Right.
I saw a quote I thought was pretty funny, and it said, "You can vote yourself into communism, but you have to shoot your way out." I was like, damn. So
there's so many similarities to what's happening today with things like the Cultural Revolution in China. It's eerie. It's so fucking eerie. With the Marxism writing Black Lives Matter, similar to how they rode the apartheid against the apartheid in South Africa. Where apartheid obviously is wrong. It's bad. But they rode that to gain political power. And then it's been, it was deadly, their rise to power.
Dude, that's why, I feel trapped in a lot of ways. Because, I feel like, it is being co-opted in some ways and, being politicized and stuff like that. And so I feel like, the politicians on the left don't necessarily have my interest in mind. Like you said, it's a lot of appeal to this emotion and these fake gestures of, oh yeah, we'll give you Martin Luther King Street, but we're not going to change any laws.
Right.
Whereas I feel like for the majority, the right doesn't necessarily represent everything that I want to see in the world. So I can't necessarily endorse, that as it stands, in its current form. So I sit here and I just go, fuck, which pile of shit do I want? Is it the diarrhea pile or is it the, chunky pile? It's just like, I don't know.
I think that's why you start with ideas, because I could never convince you to join the Republican Party. I hate the fucking Republican Party. Right? I hate the Libertarian Party. So it's like you can't talk people. You got to talk ideas. And then political parties come last. Politics comes last. It starts with foundational things. Agree upon that. And then I see political parties as nothing more than vehicles. And then you just pick the best vehicle to represent your values. And so the Marxists have been successful in turning the Democratic Party into their vehicle. Unfortunately, they're also pretty good at turning the Conservative Party, the Republican Party, into their vehicle as well. And then there's just there are two parties that are interested in expanding government and doing whatever.
I think the biggest, most recent example of why government should be reduced in size is that asshole Speaker of the House in Ohio who just got busted, for whatever it was, like $6 million,
I think it was like 60, dude. I think it was like
60. Yeah, I knew it was a 6, and it was something ridiculous. If government was reduced in size and there was not so much, call it bullshit, in the interest of expedience, there would have been no real reason to try to bribe these people in the first place.
De-incentivize corruption.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like insider trading. Like, Obama signed the what was it called? The Stock Act, maybe. Something like that. The Stock Act, I think it was. But it still doesn't do anything. Like, insider trading is like commonplace in DC. Like, I mean, they're all corrupt, like, at their core. And I don't think it's the people themselves. I think a lot of quote unquote good people go for good reasons, like into politics to like try and change things, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's just the system, and it's not a great example, but it's kind of like wives in the military. There are a lot of wives who cheat on their husbands in the military. Everybody in the military doesn't initially start dating and then marry, these, I'll be nice and call them,
Promiscuous girls.
yeah, promiscuous girls. Yeah. But I do think that like the environment like breeds like this just like shitty culture, you know what I mean? And I do think that there are similarities in that it's not necessarily the people. I think it's the environment. And once you kind of get sucked into that, I don't think there's too much getting out of it.
I feel you, man. I do want to be mindful of my wife. It takes a while for me to get ready for bed and stuff. I'd love to do this again, man. And maybe, I mean, if you want, TJ, I can figure out how to get us a Google Drive and just like upload the videos, and we can just, both have access to it and chop it up how we like, however you want to use it for, your means. And, I'll make sure, I'm not going to edit you to make it sound any crazy, crazy shit or anything like that, But yeah, I just want to make sure that we both have access to it because shit takes forever.
My only request is that we title whatever it is, left and right, fight, like in a fueled rage, fight it out. Just something just that gets people all worked up and thinking that we're going to come to massive argument.
Well, I have to do the screen capture.
Destroys.
Owned. Cool, man. Well, it's always good talking to you guys, man. You make me better. I appreciate that. And yeah, Corey, definitely send those books and stuff. I'm really looking forward to checking those out.
We'll do something offline as well. Like I think I brought up a cookout at my house. I just, like I said, I've been getting smoked something sideways at work, so I haven't had the availability to do it, but it still is my intention to do so and have both you guys come over. So.
Yeah, it'd be dope, man. Then we could talk and use some words that we can't necessarily use on the internet. Because we have the comfort of each other and the familiarity of each other and stuff.
Dude, that's the hardest part about this is trying to like formulate a thought in a way that is not that could not otherwise be represented in a way that you don't mean it. And it's difficult, but yeah, we'll do it and get together. Ryan, it's something that you're good at, man. You got like a knack for it. So
yeah, I appreciate that, man. I've enjoyed it. It's been really cool.
Yeah, it's been fun. But yeah, I think we got another video to do. I'm certainly locked and loaded for it. So
hell yeah, my dudes.
All right, well, we'll talk to you guys later.
Yeah, you guys have a good night. Take it easy.
See you guys.